Chapter 1371. No need. Guhan wanted to reject Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's invitation, but Extinguish Immortal Sword beat him to it. All right. It's settled then. We haven't seen each other for so many years. Let's see what kind of good territory you've prepared for yourself. Thus, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva brought the remaining 6 arhats, while Guhan brought Lu Shihua and Lu Yin. They stepped into the void together and headed towards the Bukong temple. What are you doing? While Extinguish Immortal Sword was speaking, Guhan didn't interrupt it. When the two of them entered the void again, Guhan asked Extinguish Immortal Sword in a low voice. You've forgotten about our little sister, the Immortal Slaughtering Sword. She needs enough chaotic energy to recover. Right now, the only people in this world who can use chaotic energy are the Jade Emperor and Vairocana. Now, I can get information about Vairocana from Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, Extinguish Immortal Sword explained. En. Guhan nodded, agreeing with Extinguish Immortal Sword's explanation. 10 minutes later, they left the void again and found themselves in front of the magnificent Bukong temple. Even Extinguish Immortal Sword couldn't help but praise it. Ksitigarbha, your Bukong temple is only a little smaller than the Mahavira Hall of Spiritual Mountain. It seems like you really plan to become a Buddha. Not at all. I wouldn't dare to have such thoughts. The master of Buddhism is still Vairocana. I'm just building a place for him to stay, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva said with a serious face, as if he really planned to do so. This hypocritical guy. After he said nonsense like hell is not empty and he won't become a Buddha, I knew he was the most hypocritical monk in the world, Extinguish Immortal Sword said with a cold smile. Extinguish Immortal Sword Lady, why do you say that Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva is hypocritical? I think this is a very grand wish. If one doesn't have great willpower and wisdom, why would he give up the temptation of becoming a Buddha and purify the spirits in hell? Lu Shihua asked, puzzled. You idiot, although Buddha is the highest position in Buddhism, it doesn't belong to those who are capable. Not even the strongest monk can become a Buddha. There are 108 Buddhas in Buddhism. Other than the top 10, the rest are not even comparable to Guanyin, Samantabhadra, Manjushri, and Ksitigarbha. Although Bodhisattva Buddhahood is a level lower than Buddha Buddhahood, Jueshian explained with a cold smile. Why is this happening? Lu Shihua muttered in a low voice, could it be that there are internal strife within the Buddhist sects, and that Buddha Tathagata is deliberately suppressing these 4 great bodhisattvas? That's not it. Vairocana can't wait for the 4 great bodhisattvas to be promoted to Buddha Buddhahood. That way, he can relax, but being a Buddha isn't that easy. It's like the investiture of the gods. Once they become Buddhas, their true spirits will be controlled by Buddha Tathagata, the ancestor of all Buddhas. None of these 4 great bodhisattvas can escape Tathagata's grasp. On the other hand, because this bodhisattva Buddhahood was personally conferred by the receiving sage, their true spirits can be controlled by the receiving sage. The receiving sage can't wait for more experts to appear under him. He's not like Vairocana, who worries about the 4 great bodhisattvas usurping his position, so he doesn't restrict the 4 great bodhisattvas at all. That's why the Buddha Buddhahood doesn't bring any benefits, and it will also make one subject to others. Unless the 4 great bodhisattvas were kicked in the head by a donkey, they wouldn't want to become Buddhas, Extinguish Immortal Sword explained. If that's the case, why do you say that Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva is a hypocritical villain? There's nothing hypocritical about him doing this. Lu Shihua was still a little puzzled. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva is the weakest among the 4 great bodhisattvas, but he's the most ambitious one. Before the other 3 bodhisattvas joined Buddhism, they were all Vairocana's senior and junior brothers, and they were of equal status. Even after joining Buddhism, the other 3 bodhisattvas relied on the support of the Primeval Lord of Heaven, so they could face Vairocana head-on. They said they wouldn't become Buddhas, and Vairocana couldn't do anything to them. Only Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was born in the far west. He didn't have any backing, so he didn't dare to openly defy Vairocana's will. However, his ambition was the greatest. He actually learned from the 6 sages and made a great vow not to become Buddhas until hell is empty. The 6 paths of reincarnation were originally firmly controlled by the 10 Yama kings, but after Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva made such a great vow, the two sages Juanti and Jain took the opportunity to force Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva into the ground, so that they could control the vital power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. With the support of the two sages Juanti and Jain, Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva naturally had the capital to fight against Vairocana, and Vairocana didn't dare to force Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva to become Buddhas. At the end of the day, Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva made a great vow not to become Buddhas until hell is empty, not to release souls from purgatory, but to preserve a chance for himself to go further. In fact, he was always coveting the position of Vairocana, and even the positions of the two sages Juanti and Jain. If this great vow really succeeded, he might really be able to become a sage. That's why I said that Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva is one of the most hypocritical monks in the world, full of his own schemes. He has never really considered the souls of the dead in hell, but he still accepted the offerings of human beings for thousands of years. He's simply shameless. Extinguish immortal sword scolded. But isn't this a great vow that's impossible to achieve? As long as there are human deaths, souls will enter the underworld. Then, the underworld will never be empty, and Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva's great vow will never be realized, Lu Shihua said. No, there's a way. Guhan, who had been listening by the side, suddenly interrupted. As long as all the living things on earth are completely destroyed, and all the ghosts in hell are destroyed, wouldn't hell be empty? Hearing Guhan's words, Lu Shihua couldn't help but shiver. This Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva was really too scary. I didn't know it was Lady Immortal Vanquishing Sword, Lady Immortal Extinguishing Sword, and Lady Immortal Entrapping Sword. This humble monk didn't welcome you from afar, and was impolite. I hope the 3 of you can forgive me. This humble monk is in a peaceful Buddhist land, and there's no such thing as alcohol. I'll use this cup of tea to apologize to you. As soon as Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva finished speaking, over 10 cups of tea tore through the void and appeared in front of everyone present. Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva raised the teacup in his hand in a rather worldly manner and nodded at the others. Ksitagarbha, the 3 of us didn't come here to drink a cup of tea from you. There's no need to say anything about apologizing. It was my master's disciple who killed your people. If you want to apologize, I'm afraid the 3 of us should be the ones doing it. As soon as Extinguish Immortal Sword finished speaking, Immortal Vanquishing Sword and Immortal Entrapping Sword raised their teacups at the same time, apologizing to Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva. We wouldn't dare, we wouldn't dare. Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva hurriedly waved his hand, but his expression quickly changed. His eyes revealed great curiosity as he looked at Guhan and asked, "Please forgive this humble monk for asking too much, but the few of you just addressed this sword-bearer as master. Could it be that this benefactor is your sword-bearer?" "That's right." Immortal Vanquishing Sword nodded. "He is our sword-bearer." "I see. This humble monk has been disrespectful. This benefactor has an imposing appearance and an extraordinary bearing. At such a young age, he has become an immortal sword-bearer. In the future, he can look forward to becoming an emperor sword-bearer. It seems that benefactor will definitely become a leader of humanity in the future, an existence comparable to Kunzu and heaven-covering Jendi. Let this humble monk offer a toast to this benefactor." This Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva had become more and more worldly. No wonder Immortal Extinguishing Sword said that he was the most hypocritical monk. "You're wrong about him. He's not someone Kunzu, who failed at the last moment, can compare to." Immortal Extinguishing Sword said calmly after hearing Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva's words. "What do you mean? Don't tell me. Your Majesties, you haven't given up." Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva was shocked and said in a panic, "We have never given up." Immortal Vanquishing Sword said calmly, "It seems that your Majesties have placed their hopes on this benefactor." Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva looked deeply at Guhan. In the end, he could not help but shake his head and said, "Your Majesties, do you really think that this benefactor can be compared to Lord Kunzu? You don't believe me, do you?" Immortal Extinguishing Sword's lips suddenly revealed a smile. "If you don't believe me, you can ask him. What is his current title?" "This." Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva looked at Guhan suspiciously. Guhan smiled and replied calmly, "I am Sword Immortal Hong Jun Klang." The teacup in Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva's hand fell to the ground. The 6 arhats behind Ksitagarbha Bodhisattva were all stunned. They had never seen Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva lose his composure like this. This Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva was not bad. He answered all the Majesty's questions without holding anything back. It seems that there is hope for Master to repair the immortal slaughtering sword. After leaving the Bukong temple, Lu Shihua immediately congratulated Guhan. After Guhan revealed his title, Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva was stunned for a full 10 seconds before he shouted Amitabha Buddha and returned to normal. Then, Immortal Vanquishing Sword told Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva about the immortal slaughtering sword, hoping that Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva could give them some pointers and tell them where Vairocana was and if he still had the ability to condense the power of chaos to repair the immortal slaughtering sword. Chapter 1372. When Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva learned that the 4 immortal slaying swords intended to continue fighting against Tongtian and reshape the entire world, he immediately became extremely excited. He repeatedly expressed his willingness to stand on the side of the 4 immortal slaying swords and Ji Han. He would do his best to help Ji Han strengthen himself, and at the same time, help the immortal slaying sword lady return. Thus, Kshitigarbha told the 4 swords that Vairocana had indeed been seriously injured after the battle in the Alps and had been hiding in Mount Numinous to recuperate. However, Vairocana knew that he had made many enemies in the past. Many of the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas in Mount Numinous had died in battle. If the enemies of the past, such as the Heavenly Court, attacked Mount Numinous, it would be impossible for Vairocana to resist. Therefore, Mahavairocana immediately hid the spiritual mountain in the dimensional space, making it constantly float in the dimensional space. Its position could change at any time, so even if the Heavenly Court wanted to seek revenge, they wouldn't be able to find the location of the spiritual mountain. Of course, there was a huge drawback. Mount Numinous and the Buddhist sect had completely lost their influence on this world. Kshitigarbha, who had escaped, had to take the opportunity to gather the Buddhist power that had come to this world after Mount Numinous disappeared, becoming the only remaining force of the Buddhist sect in this world. Therefore, the key to repairing the immortal slaughtering sword was to find Mount Numinous hidden in the dimensional space. As long as he could find Mount Numinous, he would be able to find Vairocana. At the same time, Kshitigarbha guaranteed to Guhan that Vairocana did not want this world to end. Therefore, as long as he explained his intentions clearly, Vairocana would definitely help him repair immortal slaughtering sword. In the end, Kshitigarbha told Guhan the rules and methods to find Mount Numinous in the dimensional space. He said that as long as Guhan followed his methods, he would definitely be able to find Mount Numinous. Therefore, Lu Shihua congratulated Guhan in the end, believing that Guhan would definitely be able to repair immortal slaughtering sword. Shihua, you're still too naive. Do you really think Kshitigarbha is that kind? Hearing Lu Shihua's congratulations, Guhan's face revealed a trace of a sneer. This Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva's great ambition is to not become a Buddha until hell is empty. And the best way to realize this great ambition is to destroy the whole world. He was born to stand on Tongtian's side. How could he decide to help us so easily? I'm afraid he wants to kill us. What a hypocrite. It seems like he's not telling the truth. You can't believe a single word. Lu Shihua naturally believed in his master's words, so he immediately gritted his teeth and criticized. You're wrong on this point again. A complete lie won't deceive anyone. Only a lie that's half true and half false can deceive people. Therefore, I believe that this Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva must have told us half the truth and the other half lies. Guhan smiled. Lu Shihua, what do you think the earthquake Bodhisattva said is true? Which words are false? Lu Shihua lowered his head and thought for a while. His eyes lit up as he said, it's true that Spirited Mountain is now hidden in the dimensional space, but the method he told us to find Spirited Mountain is false. If we really find Spirited Mountain according to his method, I'm afraid we'll be lost in the dimensional space like Kunzu back then. You've finally made some progress. Guhan nodded with a smile and touched Lu Shihua's head. But you still said something wrong. It's not that we'll be lost in the dimensional space, but that I, your master, will be lost in the dimensional space. Master, what do you mean? Aren't you going to take your disciple to find Spirited Mountain? Lu Shihua said with some inexplicable panic. Of course I can't take you there. I'm teaching you like this so that when I leave this world, you can protect Yuzhang City and the things I've left behind in this world. By the way, I left you a gift of the highest position in this world. Guhan touched Lu Shihua's head and said, "What? Master, are you really going to leave this world and find Spirited Mountain hidden in the dimensional space?" Lu Shihua did not care about the highest position in the world at all. She only cared about her master's next move and where her master was going. "No. My goal is not Spirited Mountain. I'm still millions of quarks away from becoming an Emperor sword wielder. Repairing the Celestial Culling Sword now doesn't mean much to me, and there's no need to find Spirited Mountain now," Guhan said with a smile. "Then, where are you going, Master?" Lu Shihua asked in confusion. "Master, I'm going to save someone. I've been waiting for this for 4 years. Now that I've finally become an immortal sword wielder, it's time to take action." "Then, are you leaving now, Master?" Lu Shihua's eyes suddenly welled up with tears. She threw herself into Guhan's arms and said, "Master, don't go, please. Don't worry, I won't leave for the time being. You don't have 1,000,000 quarks of sword essence yet, so your cultivation isn't over yet." On this day, at the entrance of the Yangjing City Construction Committee headquarters building, the entire building could be said to be decorated with red flags and fluttering flags. Rows of beautiful women in slender kyongsams stood on both sides of the road. Countless sword wielders, which were rarely seen on normal days, appeared in groups at the Sword Committee headquarters. There were also countless cameras aimed at the entrance of the Sword Committee headquarters. The reason why the Sword Committee headquarters was so lively today was that it was an extremely important day. Today was the day when the chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters would be re-elected, which happened once every 5 years. It was said that the previous chairman, Sword Immortal Hao Tian, had entered a state of dying and might become an immortal at any time. Naturally, he could no longer hold the position of chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters. In that case, the Sword Committee headquarters was bound to change to a new chairman. However, all the netizens had a fairly unified answer for the result of this new chairman. The chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters had to be Long Shijendi. The important position of the chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters had always been held by Emperor sword wielders since ancient times. Now that Hao Tianjendi was about to become an immortal, there was only one Emperor sword wielder left, Long Shijendi. Therefore, there would be no accident in the result of this election. It must be Long Shijendi. Although everyone felt that there was no suspense in this result, it still could not stop people's curiosity about the election meeting of the Sword Committee headquarters. Almost all the sword wielders in Yangjing City who were not qualified to attend the meeting were waiting at the entrance of the Sword Committee headquarters. The vast number of ordinary people were not qualified to come here. They could only wait for the final result to be published through the television broadcast. According to the past practice, the result would be released to the public at around 12 o'clock in the afternoon. However, what was strange was that there was no result until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This made the waiting people feel anxious, but they also had a faint guess. Could it be that there would be any accident or change in the result of today's election? This meeting lasted until 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Just when all the audience was waiting impatiently, the figures of a large group of people finally gradually appeared at the entrance of the Sword Committee headquarters and appeared in front of the camera. These sword-bearers were all sword-bearers of the Immortal Sword tier. They were the strongest fighting force of mankind. Apart from a few sword-bearers of the Immortal Sword tier who had to stay in the base city due to the unusual situation near the base city, almost all sword-bearers of the Immortal Sword tier were present in this group of people. Some careful audience members counted and found that the total number of Immortal Sword wielders present had reached 31. It seemed that in the past 4 years, mankind had added a lot of Immortal Sword wielders. Strange. Why isn't Long Shijendi in the team? When all the sword wielders appeared on the high platform where the result was published, some sharp-eyed audience members were immediately surprised to find that Long Shijendi did not appear in the team of sword wielders. It should be known that in all the election meetings of the Sword Committee headquarters held in human history, Emperor sword wielders had never been absent. At least one Emperor sword wielder would appear in front of the camera. At the same time, This Emperor Sword Wielder would most likely be the successor of the next chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters. But today, this 1,000-year tradition was broken. Unexpectedly, no Emperor Sword Wielder appeared in front of the camera. Could it be that there was really a change in the facts? His Majesty Long Shijendi didn't come to Yangjing City this time, right? That's why he didn't appear in the meeting? Some audience members guessed. Impossible. The friend next to him immediately retorted. Don't forget that yesterday, Long Shijendi recorded the meeting in front of everyone in Yangjing City. All the TV stations also specially broadcast this scene live. How could Long Shijendi not participate in the meeting? I think there must have been some change in this meeting, so Long Shijendi is not willing to appear in front of the camera. What change in the world? It actually made Long Shijendi violate the tradition of more than 1,000 years. This audience member was even more surprised. Who knows? For all we know, there might be another Emperor Sword Wielder. Another person shrugged and said, "Hello, fellow human beings. Today, I am honored to announce to everyone that the Supreme Leader of Humanity, the 199th Chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters, has finally been elected successfully today. In the coming years, all of us humans will unite by the side of the Chairman. With the Chairman as the core, we will create a better and safer future for humanity." The Great Sun Sword Immortal held the script in his hand. Without a microphone, just his strong voice was enough for everyone present and the camera to hear clearly what he was saying. However, those with sharp eyes must have noticed that at this time, there were actually a few drops of sweat on the forehead of the Great Sun Sword Immortal. At the end of the nonsense on the script, when he was finally about to announce the new chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters, suddenly there was a burst of exclamation from the entire venue. Behind the Great Sun Sword Immortal, a void door opened, and Long Shijendi, with a solemn face, passed through the void door and came to the ceremonial platform. Long Shijendi finally appeared. It seems that there is no change in the result this time. The new chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters is still His Majesty Long Shijendi. Seeing this scene, all the audience members breathed a long sigh of relief, as if the result had been decided. Chapter 1373. The representatives from the 3 base cities who were in charge of being bystanders also spoke. Among them, Buenos Aires had a total of 3 immortal sword-bearers. One of them was in charge of the base city, and only 2 of them were present. Lenglen had 4 immortal sword-bearers, and one of them was also in charge of the base city. Finally, Moscow had the most immortal sword-bearers among the 5 base cities, with a total of 5. Of course, there was also one person in charge of the base city. On the stage, the Great Sun Sword Immortal read the script in his hands with trepidation. He could not help but recall all the scenes that had happened in the meeting that day. Holy *T. A immortal sword bearer, the chairman of the Sword Committee? Did I hear wrongly? This can't be real. An audience member rubbed his ears in disbelief. Our Buenos Aires city also has no candidate to recommend. There should be 35 people in this meeting. 4 are absent, so there are 31 people. The 4 who are absent can express their opinions online and exercise their voting rights. This meets the minimum requirement of 90% of the participants. I hereby announce that the voting for the 199th chairman of the Sword Committee shall now begin. Who hasn't announced yet? Sword Immortal Dweluan shook his head in confusion. In the end, his gaze landed on Sword Immortal Ling Shu, who was sitting alone in a corner. Only then did he come to a sudden realization. So Yuzhong City hasn't made a decision yet. But that's alright, I can speak on behalf of Yuzhong City. Yuzhong City has no candidate to recommend. Whoosh. Both the people waiting at the venue and the people watching the live broadcast in front of their televisions were stunned. After hearing this news, everyone fell into a state of shock. After a few seconds of deathly silence, everyone was in an uproar. No one could have expected that the final winner would be Lu Shihua. However, it was only for a brief moment. They did not take this slight tremble to heart. Our Bailin City also has no candidate to recommend, the immortal sword bearer from Bailin City said. Bailin City originally had 3 immortal sword bearers. However, One of them had to stay in Bailin City, so only 2 were present. More importantly, as long as she doesn't die in the future, she might be able to ascend to the throne before she's 30 years old. It shouldn't be a big problem for her to live to 82 years old. In that case, she would have 50 years of Emperor Sword's peak, which would be able to do a lot of things for humanity. Even if Long Shijendi is standing in front of them now, Long Shijendi can only live for more than 20 years at most. The next 40 years will all belong to her. Of course, it is a very normal thing to please her now. Alright. Since Yang Jing doesn't have a candidate to recommend, the current situation is very clear. Only His Majesty Long Shijendi is participating in the election. We don't even need to vote. We can directly announce the new chairman of the Sword Committee. The great Sun Sword Immortal took a deep breath and forced himself to announce the result in front of everyone. I hereby announce that the 199th chairman of the Sword Committee is an immortal sword-level sword wielder from Yuzhong City Sword Pavilion Master, Shihua Sword Immortal, Miss Lu Shihua. The same goes for Moscow. Who said that Yuzhong City doesn't have a candidate to recommend? Sword Immortal Overlook Void gritted his teeth and abruptly stood up from his chair. He then took out a candidate book from his dimensional pocket and said, Yuzhong City recommends Shihua Sword Spirit as a candidate to run for the 199th chairman of the Sword Committee. Strange. Why do I feel that Miss Ling's tone is a little strange? It feels like there's a hidden meaning in her words. She wants to see us make a fool of ourselves. Although Lionian Ling's answer was very normal, in the ears of some old people, there was something unusual in Lionian Ling's words. *T history. It's not like there hasn't been a chairman of the Sword Committee at the immortal sword level in the past. Don't forget those guys from the Liu Nian family. I really don't know how you passed the history exam. You don't even know about such a compulsory test, a friend said disdainfully. Sword Immortal Shi Hua is a sword wielder at the immortal sword level from Yuzhong City. He inherited the will of the great heaven-shrouding Jendi and became the new leader of humanity. At the same time, Sword Immortal Shi Hua is also the youngest sword wielder in human history. At the age of 22, he stood at the position of a sword wielder at the immortal sword level. This is a miracle that has never happened since ancient times. You should know that just a year ago, this record was maintained at the age of 29. Sword Immortal Shi Hua forcibly raised this record by a full 7 years. His ability is obvious. If not me, who else can do it? The sword wielder in London who had just become a sword wielder at the immortal sword level immediately jumped out and said matter-of-factly, I don't think these committee members are crazy. On the contrary, they made the most correct decision. Being 22 years old is not a burden to Sword Immortal Shi Hua. On the contrary, it is her biggest advantage. A sword wielder at the immortal sword level at the age of 22 has also broken the record that has existed for 1,000 years. Even back then, Kenzu only ascended to the throne at the age of 29. She is indeed the first person to do this. *T. I was almost scared to death. Speaking of which, does this count as us witnessing history? This is the first human supreme leader at the immortal sword level in history. This audience member clutched his chest as if his heart had jumped out of his chest because of this news. Sorry, you really didn't hear wrong. This Sword Immortal Shi Hua will be the supreme leader of our human race for the next 5 years. How about it? Are you surprised? Aren't you surprised? His friend replied. This question stopped his friend. After hesitating for a while, he said with slight hesitation, Did we forget someone? We forgot that behind Sword Immortal Shi Hua, there is an even more terrifying master, Sword Immortal Hong Jun, who has not been heard of for a long time. We have no candidates to recommend, just like London. This representative of London was our old acquaintance, Miss Liu Anna. However, in this year, there had been a lot of changes in London. For example, there was another young sword wielder at the immortal sword level in London, and the total number of sword wielder at the immortal sword level had reached 3. In order to support Long Shijendi, these 3 sword wielder at the emperor sword level attended this meeting. We have no candidates to recommend in Yangjing. At this time, since the great Sun Sword Immortal had become the host of the meeting, he naturally could no longer be the representative of Yangjing. Fortunately, Yang Jing had the most sword wielder at the immortal sword level, so immediately a valiant and heroic woman with a smile on her face stood up and said. But that is also 20 years later. Now Longsha Jendi is still the strongest in the world. How can he let this sword immortal Shi Hua take the position that was originally destined to belong to him? Even if Longsha Jendi is broad-minded, this is no longer a simple matter of broad-mindedness. This is related to the face of Jendi. Today's action is more vicious than a slap in Longsha Jendi's face. The meeting began at 10 o'clock in the morning. Longsha Jendi also appeared in the meeting room as expected. At that time, except for the sword-bearers of Yangjing and Yuzhang City, the sword-bearers of the other base cities looked as usual. There was no surprise or excitement. Obviously, in their eyes, there was no longer any suspense about the position of the supreme leader of humanity. We, London, recommend Longsha Jendi as a candidate to run for the 199th chairman of the Sword Committee. After the 5 base cities had finished speaking, the representative of London finally stood up and handed his city's election letter to the Great Sun Sword Immortal. Hey, Sword Immortal Doran, don't be so hasty. There is still a base city that has not announced its decision. The Great Sun Sword Immortal shook his head and said. At the same time, Sword Immortal Shihua has the Angel bloodline and can synchronize the Angel series sword ladies without any hindrance. At 10:32 this morning, he successfully synchronized with the Sword Lady 10-winged Angel sword. As long as he reaches 10 million quarks of sword elements, he is destined to be able to synchronize with the Sword Lady 12-winged Angel sword. He is destined to be an Emperor sword-bearer and is worthy of being one of the strongest people in the future of humanity. He is also the hope of humanity's future. By the way, Yangjing City had also given birth to a new Sword Lady, so there were a total of 12 Sword Lady in Yangjing City. First, let's elect a candidate. Each base city has a candidate for the chairman of the Sword Committee. Representatives of the base cities, please submit your candidate's election letter in writing. After the representative of London handed over the election letter, all the other base cities turned their attention to the representative of Yangjing City. At this time, the only person who was qualified to compete with Longsha Jendi for the chairman of the Sword Committee was Yangjing City's Emperor sword-bearer, Hao Tian Jendi. However, everyone felt that Hao Tian Jendi was too stupid to compete with Longsha Jendi. He had been the chairman of the Sword Committee for 15 years, and it was time to give this position to a younger person. The Great Sun Sword Immortal loudly explained to everyone why he had chosen Lu Shihua. At the same time, the audience also began to discuss. Hey, people from the Liu Nian family, how can they be the same? This audience member did not care about his friend's analogy. He continued to ask excitedly and curiously, do you think that the heads of these sword committee members are filled with *T? Why would they choose a sword immortal sword wielder, and a mere 22-year-old sword immortal sword wielder at that? What are they going to do to the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor? I'm afraid Longsha Jendi is going crazy. I'm afraid he will be the first Emperor sword-bearer in history. Hello, Miss Ling. Everyone nodded to this female sword-bearer. This young lady of the Liu Nian family had become a sword lady sword-bearer at the age of 23, breaking the unprecedented record for a sword lady sword-bearer. This age had already surpassed the ancestors of the Liu Nian family, including Kunzu. This young lady had a high chance of becoming the 4th Emperor sword-bearer in the Liu Nian family since ancient times. Perhaps in another decade, Miss Ling could also stand here and compete with Longsha Jendi for the position of chairman of the Sword Committee. However, she could not do so now, so she could only wisely represent Yangjing City and give up this competition. The host of this meeting was still the Great Sun Sword Immortal, but when he spoke, his voice was obviously trembling. This was heard by the people from other base cities, and they were a little curious. We, Los Angeles, have no candidates to recommend. A white-haired old man said first, and then the other 2 people beside him nodded involuntarily. There were a total of 3 sword lady sword-bearers in Los Angeles, and all of them were present today. Chapter 1374. Silence. The entire conference room was silent. Apart from the immortal sword wielders in Yangjing City, All the other immortal sword wielders in the other base cities stared at Sword Immortal Ling Shu as if he were a monster. The entire conference room was silent for a full minute before Sword Immortal Doran couldn't help but say, "Sword Immortal Ling Shu, did I hear you right? You said Shihua Sword Spirit, not Shihua Sword Immortal, and definitely not Shihua Jendi. It's the West Flower Sword Spirit." Sword Immortal Ling Shu braced himself and said, "Sword Immortal Ling Shu. No, Senior Ling Shu. I think you're getting on in years, your reaction isn't very good. I think you should hurry up and take back this letter of election." Sword Immortal Dweluan pressed a hand against the letter of election in Sword Immortal Ling Shu's hand. What? Could it be that the rules of the Sword Committee headquarters clearly state that a spirit sword holder is not qualified to be a candidate for the chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters? No. Sword Immortal Dweluan still wanted to speak, but the Great Sun Sword Immortal immediately replied. Meanwhile, Sword Immortal Ling Shu heaved a long sigh of relief and handed the candidate list to the Great Sun Sword Immortal. "Your Majesty." Sword Immortal Dweluan couldn't help but turn his gaze towards Long Jendi. Long Jendi, who had never thought that such a scene would occur, couldn't help but show a somewhat cautious expression. He knew that Lu Shihua was Guhan's disciple, and he also knew how Guhan had pushed Lu Shihua to the position of Yuzhong Sword Pavilion Master. Long She and Jendi were completely unable to see through this Guhan. Only God knew whether this Guhan would arrange any obstacles for him or not. Thinking of this, even Long Jendi, who felt that he was absolutely safe, had no choice but to reveal a cautious expression. Cough cough. "Doran, step down." Long Jendi first asked Sword Immortal Doran to step down, and then lightly said to everyone, "This emperor naturally knows the rules of the Sword Committee, but the Sword Committee also has such a rule, that the candidates must personally attend the election meeting. It's just that I don't see the Sword Spirit of Shihua in this venue. If the Sword Spirit of Shihua can't appear, I'm afraid he'll be disqualified." That's right. There is indeed such a rule. Yes. Since she wants to participate in the election of the Sword Committee, it is necessary to maintain respect for the Sword Committee. If she wants to participate in the election without coming here, of course, it is impossible. The other Sword Immortal level swordbearers of other base cities nodded repeatedly, echoing Long Jegendi's statement. "We're here. The Shihua Sword Spirit has already arrived in Yangjing City, and I guarantee that he will be in the conference room before 11 o'clock. Sword Immortal Ling Shu immediately stood up. "All right. I will have the security personnel guarding the conference room pay attention. When the Sword Spirit of Shihua arrives, they will immediately open up a green passageway and let the Sword Spirit of Shihua enter quickly." "Oh, that's fine." Long Jendi nodded, then used his mind to send a message to Doran Sword Immortal through his personal terminal. Doran Sword Immortal immediately stood up and retorted, "I'm afraid that won't work either." "Sword Immortal Doran, what else do you have to say?" Great Sun Sword Immortal said with some displeasure. "It's very simple. According to the rules of the Sword Committee, only Sword Immortal level and above swordbearers are qualified to participate in today's election meeting. Therefore, all the people gathered here today are genuine Sword Immortal level swordbearers, and not a single spirit sword level is in this conference room. So, according to the rules, the Sword Spirit of Shihua is naturally not qualified to enter. Therefore, I hope that Senior Great Sun Sword Immortal can abide by the rules of the Sword Committee, and not let in any unruly swordbearers, instead of opening up some green passageway." Sword Immortal Doran said proudly. "Yes. That's right, there is indeed such a rule. Yes, we can't let the Sword Spirit of Shihua enter the conference room. Otherwise, wouldn't the other spirit sword level swordbearers also be qualified to enter? His Majesty Long Jendi is really amazing." With just a few words, he blocked all the paths of the Sword Spirit of Shihua. "I don't think it matters. A spirit sword level swordbearer coming here is just asking to be humiliated. Who would really vote for her? Oh, I reckon that Sword Immortal Ling Shu's vote will be for her." The Sword Immortal level swordbearers from other base cities discussed animatedly. At the same time, they praised the power of Long Jegendi's two combination punches. On one hand, he required the candidates to stay in the conference room, and on the other hand, he didn't let the spirit sword level swordbearers have a chance to appear in the conference room. Perfectly and reasonably using the rules, he firmly blocked the opponent outside the door. It was just that many sword immortal level swordbearers were a little curious. Did Long Shi have to do this? Did he really think that a spirit sword level swordbearer could threaten his position? Great Sun Sword Immortal, since all the letters of election have been delivered and the candidates have been confirmed, can you announce the start of the voting? In just a few seconds, Long Shi directly opened his mouth and urged. A dozen beads of sweat instantly appeared on Great Sun Sword Immortal's forehead. He looked at Sword Immortal Ling Shu with a very difficult expression, giving him an extremely complicated look that contained thousands of words. Sword Immortal Ling Shu shook his head slightly at Great Sun Sword Immortal, indicating that he should continue to delay. Great Sun Sword Immortal, what are you still looking at? Hurry up and announce the start of the voting. If you, Great Sun Sword Immortal, feel that you are not feeling well, then I can help you to preside over this voting. Long Shi urged again, and even wanted to snatch the Great Sun Sword Immortal's hosting circle, not giving Great Sun Sword Immortal any chance to delay. His Majesty Long Shi is right. Great Sun Sword Immortal, you can indeed announce the start of the voting. Just as Great Sun Sword Immortal was in a dilemma, the door of the conference room was suddenly pushed open, and a somewhat vigorous and heroic figure strode into the conference room. Lu Shihua. It's sword spirit Lu Shihua. She actually came. Seeing this young girl who suddenly appeared, many immortal sword rank swordbearers immediately recognized her. Originally, the immortal sword rank swordbearers were not interested in learning more about a spiritual sword rank swordbearer. However, because Lu Shihua was the insane disciple of Ji Yu Han, all the immortal sword rank swordbearers could not help but pay attention to Lu Shihua. They had also seen many pictures of Lu Shihua. However, compared to the Lu Shihua in the photos, the current Lu Shihua's skin was a little darker, and her temperament was more valiant. Her eyes were filled with confidence that Lu Shihua had never shown before. This especially left a deep impression on Great Sun Sword Immortal. Compared to the timid little girl from a year ago, Lu Shihua seemed to be a completely different person. One could faintly see the shadow of Guhan in her. How dare you? Who let you in? Get out immediately. This is not a place where a spirit sword rank swordbearer can enter. Sword Immortal Doran was the first to react, and immediately tugged on Lu Shihua's sleeve, driving her out with a displeased expression. Please be a little more respectful. Lu Shihua's arm shook slightly, and Sword Immortal Doran's arm was involuntarily pushed to the side by Lu Shihua. My hand. Sword Immortal Doran looked at his own palm in disbelief. He had not felt anything just now, and his palm had already left Lu Shihua's arm. Unexpectedly, Great Sun Sword Immortal Doran suddenly took the initiative to say to Lu Shihua, Sword Spirit Lu Shihua, this is indeed not a place where a spirit sword rank swordbearer like you should be. Senior Great Sun Sword Immortal, please rest assured. I, Lu Shihua, understand these rules. How about this? As Lu Shihua's voice fell, a void gate instantly tore open in front of her. It quietly floated beside Lu Shihua, silently maintaining its own existence. A void gate. All the immortal sword rank swordbearers present exchanged a few glances, as if asking if the other party had opened a void gate. However, the shock in everyone's eyes showed that none of the other immortal sword rank swordbearers present had opened a void gate. This void gate had been opened by Lu Shihua's own power. Putting away the void gate, Lu Shihua said calmly, this can prove my identity, and whether I have the right to stay in this conference room. That's right. This is enough. Shihua, you indeed have the right to stay in this conference room. Great Sun Sword Immortal suddenly smiled, and at the same time, said to all the swordbearers present, just now, news came from the sword tower. Just a minute ago, Miss Lu Shihua successfully completed synchronization with the immortal sword rank sword mistress, the 10-winged angel sword lady, stored in our Yangjing city. Miss Lu Shihua has also officially become an immortal sword rank swordbearer. Congratulations, Sword Immortal Shihua. Great Sun Sword Immortal was the first to applaud. Congratulations, Shihua. Sword Immortal Ling Shu finally let out a long sigh of relief, and then also applauded and congratulated. In the face of a new immortal sword rank swordbearer, it was basic etiquette to applaud and congratulate, so in the end, even Long Shijendi had to applaud and congratulate Sword Immortal Xihua. At the same time, this also meant that Sword Immortal Xihua indeed had the right to stay in this conference room, and also had the right to become a candidate. Long Shijendi also had to face this competitor who had suddenly appeared in front of him. Next, let's invite the two candidates to give their own campaign speeches. Great Sun Sword Immortal continued, and Lu Xihua and Long Shijendi also gave their own campaign speeches one after another. The Dragon Lion Sword Emperor's speech was very stable. Just like all the previous chairmen who had succeeded in the election, it covered all aspects and was basically flawless. But also because of the watertight reason, there were almost no highlights in this speech, making people who listened to it feel drowsy. This was obviously something that could only be written by a veteran author who had been writing for many years. But Lu Xihua's speech was different. Although a lot of important things were missing, and even some sentences were not smooth, the whole speech was full of all kinds of problems, and the literary talent was almost non-existent. But Lu Xihua focused on how he planned to create a new future for mankind, and even revealed his plan to build a new 9th base city. The whole speech was full of enthusiasm, full of the youthful spirit that young people should have. Obviously, this speech was written by Lu Xihua himself. Chapter 1375. If the voting results were to be decided by the speech alone, then I would definitely vote for Miss Lu Xihua. Unfortunately, that's not the case. After listening to the speeches of the two speakers, an immortal sword-level swordsman said with a serious expression. This sentence seemed to explain the results of this voting. Let's begin the voting. According to the rules, the base city with the least voting rights will be the first to vote. The Great Sun Sword Immortal said. Because the candidates don't have voting rights, Yuzhong City only has 2 votes. The immortal sword-level swordsman of Yuzhong City will be the first to announce his choice. All right, Sword Immortal Ling Shu, the immortal sword-level swordsman of Yuzhong City, votes for Sword Immortal Xihua. Sword Immortal Ling Shu stood up and said without hesitation. The other swordsmen present didn't find this result strange. Readers might find it strange, shouldn't the voting be a secret vote? That is to hide the identities of all the voters to avoid retaliation after the voting results were out? To answer this question, readers can refer to the voting process of the United Nations before the Great Apocalypse. The voting results of all countries were all announced transparently, and only then would the world know that the Chinese always abstained. Sword Immortal Hongjun, the immortal sword-level swordsman of Yuzhong City, votes for Sword Immortal Xihua. After Sword Immortal Ling Shu's voice fell, Guhan's voice suddenly sounded from the broadcast in the conference room, announcing the results of his voting. The other immortal sword-level swordsmen were a little puzzled by this situation. Even a fool knew that Sword Immortal Ling Shu didn't have the courage to support Lu Xihua as the chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters. In the entire Yuzhong City, only Sword Immortal Xihua's master, Sword Immortal Hongjun Guhan, had such an audacious idea. Therefore, the mastermind behind all this had to be this Sword Immortal Hongjun. At the crucial moment that would decide whether they would win or lose, this Sword Immortal Hongjun didn't control the entire situation at the conference, but instead left the conference to vote through the quantum communication network. Could it be that this Sword Immortal Hongjun was so ambitious that he felt that Xihua's victory was already in his grasp? Long Shijendi, 0 votes, Sword Immortal Xihua, 2 votes. The projector on the screen immediately showed the current voting results, and Sword Immortal Xihua was leading by 2 votes. The city of Buenos Aires has 3 votes. Next, the sword-bearers of Buenos Aires will begin voting. The Great Sun Sword Immortal continued. I, Sword Celestial, who belongs to the Sword Immortal realm in Buenos Aires, vote for the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor. Sword-level swordsman of Sword-level swordsman of Buenos Aires City, votes for Long Shijendi. Sword-level swordsman of Sword-level swordsman for Long for Sword-in, said. Immortal sword-level swordsman Buffa Long City. Sword-level swordsman said 1. Said, it 4 Long sword-level swordsman. Buenos of immortal sword-level swordsman. Said. In this way, Long Shijendi had 3 votes, successfully overtaking Lu Xihua. Next was Berlin, which had 3 votes, Jerusalem, which had 4 votes, London, which had 3 votes, and Moscow, which had 5 votes, announced that it would vote for Longsha-Jendi. The score had reached a very wide gap of 18-2. Longsha-Jendi had 18 votes, while Liu Shihua only had 2 votes from Yuzhong City. At this time, only Yangjing City, which had the largest number of people, had not yet voted. However, it seemed that the sword-level swordsmen of Yangjing City could not change the whole situation at all. Although Yangjing City had an unprecedented 12 sword-level swordsmen, even if all 12 of them voted for Liu Shihua, they would only have 14 votes, which could not shake Longsha-Jendi's 18 votes. Besides, how could all the sword-level swordsmen of Yangjing City vote for Sword Immortal Shihua? Even a fool knew that the history between Yangjing City and Yuzhong City was full of filth and strife. It was impossible for the people of these 2 cities to come together. Therefore, at this time, except for all the swordsmen of Yangjing City and Yuzhong City, almost all the sword-level swordsmen of Yangjing City thought that Longsha-Jendi had already won. Until the first sword-level swordsman of Yangjing City to vote, Sword Immortal Liu Ling, stood up and announced the result of her vote. I, Sword Immortal Liu Ling, the Sword Immortal of Yangjing City, cast my vote for Sword Immortal Shihua. Liuyan Ling announced loudly, without any hesitation, that she had cast her vote for Liu Shihua. Hearing this result, although the other people present were a little surprised, they still felt that it was within their understanding. Now the whole human world had already spread that Liuyan Ling, the heir of the Liuyan family, had an ambiguous relationship with Sword Immortal Shihua's master. Sword Immortal Hong Jun. Sword Immortal Hong Jun was very likely to become the son-in-law of the Liuyan family in the future. In this way, Sword Immortal Liu Ling was Sword Immortal Shihua's master's wife, so it was not strange that Liuyan Ling would cast her vote for her man's disciple. I, Sword Immortal Great Sun, the Sword Immortal of Yangjing City, cast my vote for Sword Immortal Shihua. The next to vote was Sword Immortal Great Sunday. The crowd's disagreement with the Sword Immortal Great Sun's choice was even greater than that of Liuyan Ling. However, they could still find an explanation. It was said that Sword Immortal Great Sun owed Sword Immortal Hong Jun a huge favor in order to retrieve the natural sword lady that had been lost in Yangjing City. Therefore, it seemed reasonable that he would use a vote to repay this favor. I, Sword Immortal Wu Zhong, the Sword Immortal of Yangjing City, cast my vote for Sword Immortal Shihua. The next to vote was Wu Zhong Shifang. This vote caused everyone's jaws to drop. This time, they seemed to be unable to find a normal reason to explain Wu Zhong Shifang's choice. I heard that Sword Immortal Hong Jun was on good terms with Sword Immortal Wu Zhong when he was still an ancient Sword Immortal. Perhaps they are old friends. Finally, some Sword Immortal of Yangjing City, who had a deep understanding of the history of Guhan's rise, made a weak guess. I, Sword Immortal XX, the Sword Immortal of Yangjing City, cast my vote for Sword Immortal Shihua. However, what happened next terrified everyone. There was no change in the 12 Sword Immortal Shihua swordbearers in Yangjing City. They all cast their votes for Sword Immortal Shihua. This was a total of 12 votes. In the blink of an eye, the score between the two became 18-14. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Now that all the Sword Immortal Shihua swordbearers have finished voting, His Majesty is still ahead by a total of 4 votes. The position of chairman is still His Majesty. Sword Immortal Dweluan saw that the atmosphere in the conference room was a little strange, so he took the initiative to say this loudly. Sword Immortal Dweluan felt that after he said this, the atmosphere in the conference room should ease. At the same time, he should officially announce that His Majesty was the new supreme leader of the human race. However, what surprised Sword Immortal Dweluan was that after he said this, the atmosphere in the conference room did not ease. Instead, more than half of the Sword Immortal Shihua swordbearers looked at Sword Immortal Dweluan mockingly, as if what Sword Immortal Dweluan had just said was very stupid. Did I say something wrong? I said. Sword Immortal Dweluan wanted to say more, but the Pirate Immortal Shihua, who was sitting next to him, immediately poked him in the back with Sword Chi. At the same time, he whispered in Sword Immortal Dweluan's ear, "Shut up. There is still one person who hasn't voted." Sword Immortal Dweluan's face instantly swelled red. After hearing the Pirate Immortal Shihua's reminder, This young sword immortal Shihua finally reacted. There was indeed one more person who hadn't voted. Your Majesty Hao Tian, are you there? Would you like to have a chat with me? Of course, Long Shijendi knew who the most important person was. If he could not get that person's support, it was very likely that he would fall short by one vote. Therefore, Long Shijendi immediately sent a communication invitation to that person. However, what made Long Shijendi feel a little hopeless was that no matter how many times he sent the invitation, that person did not pick up his communication. In the end, he only heard a somewhat weak voice coming from the entire conference room. I, Yangjing City's Sword Immortal Shihua, Hao Tian Jendi, cast my 5 votes for Sword Immortal Shihua. In the next second, the face of Long Shijendi, who was originally high and mighty, darkened. A void door appeared in front of him, and in the next second, Long Shijendi disappeared into the void door. Obviously, Long Shijendi knew that he could no longer change this damn situation. Well, everyone, now that all the Sword Immortal level and above have completed their votes, the final results are as follows. His Majesty Long Shijendi has 18 votes, and Sword Immortal Shihua has 19 votes. I now announce that Sword Immortal Shihua has won by 1 vote. The 199th chairman of the Sword Committee is Sword Immortal Shihua from Yuzhang City. After the Great Sun Sword Immortal announced this result, his forehead was already beaded with sweat. To the Great Sun Sword Immortal, saying this was even more painful than fighting with Yuenko and the others. He won. After hearing this result, Sword Immortal Ling Shu instantly slumped weakly into the chair. On the other hand, Sword Immortal Shihua had a calm expression, as if all this was already within her expectations. Oh my God! Has the first Sword Immortal level chairman of the Sword Committee in 1,000 years finally been born? After hearing this result, the sword-bearers from the other base cities did not feel any anger or joy. After all, it was not someone from their city who had become the supreme leader of the human race, so who was elected in the end had little to do with them. At this moment, all they felt was amazement. They were amazed that the first human supreme leader in 1,000 years who was not from the Lunyan family had become the supreme leader of the human race. They wanted to find out what kind of mental illness had gotten into Yangjing City, and what kind of benefits had they received for them to unanimously vote for Lu Shihua. This was something that no one could understand at this moment. How can this be? This is unfair. Our Majesty Long Shijendi has not voted yet. He has a total of 5 votes, Enough. The Pirate Sword Immortal stood up abruptly and said calmly, His Majesty Long Shi is a candidate. His Majesty does not have the right to vote for himself. Didn't you see that His Majesty has already left? This means that His Majesty has already acknowledged the results of this election. Let us go congratulate Chairman Shihua. Sword Immortal Doran's face instantly turned ashen. Chapter 1376. At the same time, the Great Sun Sword Immortal finally finished reading the speech in his hand. But just as the Great Sun Sword Immortal was worried about, after he announced the final result, all the audience fell into a deathly silence. According to the usual practice, after the announcement of the result, all the audience should applaud enthusiastically to welcome the birth of the new supreme leader of mankind. But this long silence made the whole scene fall into an extremely awkward atmosphere, which showed that the audience did not recognize the final result of the election. They did not want an immortal sword-level sword-bearer to become their supreme leader. At this time, all the audience's attention was focused on Long Shijendi, who had just appeared. They looked eagerly at Long Shijendi. At this time, as long as Long Shijendi shouted loudly, they would immediately respond to Long Shijendi's call to expose this hypocritical vote. Oh no! Seeing this scene, the Great Sun Sword Immortal's heart suddenly sank. Now was the time for everyone to gather. If Long Shijendi really said something to resist, it was estimated that the whole scene would fall into a state of loss of control. God knew what the final result would be. Clap 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 clap. To everyone's surprise, Long Shijendi, who was the focus of attention, suddenly began to applaud. And seeing this scene, the Great Sun Sword Immortal shivered from head to toe and also applauded. The other immortal sword-level sword-bearers of Yangjing City immediately followed suit and applauded together. Seeing Longsha Jendi applauding himself, the other immortal sword-level sword-bearers of other base cities were too lazy to oppose anything, and began to applaud for the first time. And as the applause sounded on the ceremonial platform, sparse applause also began to appear under the ceremonial platform. In the end, the audience who could not get a response from Longsha Jendi could only applaud helplessly. In the end, there was finally a burst of applause on the stage and under the stage. Although there were many people applauding, there was no enthusiasm in the applause. Years later, in the 5th episode of the documentary series Shihua Jendi, a director said, "This was probably the most mocking and helpless applause in the voting ceremony of the new chairman of the Sword Committee in the past 1,000 years. At that time, those helpless and angry people who cursed the shady politics in their hearts had no idea what a great new era this new supreme leader of mankind would usher in." With the applause of Longsha Jendi, who represented that one of the strongest human beings had truly recognized Lu Shihua's identity, the final result became indisputable. Longsha Jendi had completely given up his last chance to become the supreme leader of mankind. At this time, Longsha Jendi, who was constantly applauding, felt a sense of loss in his heart as he recalled everything that had just happened. When he heard that Haotian Jendi had cast all his 5 votes for Lu Shihua, Longsha Jendi knew that the overall situation could not be changed. In anger, Longsha Jendi directly opened the void door, and the next second, he appeared in front of the door of a simple 2-story building. Because this small building had a formation to suppress the void, otherwise, Longsha Jendi would have rushed directly into this small building through the void. Who is it? This is His Majesty Haotian's seclusion place. No one is allowed to enter. Seeing someone suddenly appear in front of the small building, the 2 heavily armed special soldiers guarding the door immediately pointed their guns at Longsha Jendi and said, "Get out of here." Longsha Jendi angrily waved his sleeves, and the 2 special soldiers directly flew dozens of meters away and heavily hit the ground. Blood instantly flowed on the ground, and they were seriously injured. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The 2 special soldiers used the last of their strength to press the alarm, and in an instant, hundreds of special soldiers rushed out from all directions and aimed their guns at Longsha Jendi again. Just as the angry Longsha Jendi was about to send these ungrateful special soldiers flying, a weak voice suddenly came from the small building. "This is Longsha Jendi, how can you stop him? You retreat and invite His Majesty Longsha in." Yes. Just like their sudden appearance, these special soldiers also disappeared without a trace in just a few seconds with their 2 seriously injured comrades. After a cold snort, Longsha Jendi kicked open the door of the small building and directly walked inside. The decoration of the small building was very simple. On the first floor, there was only a simple living room, a simple kitchen, and a few small doors to several rooms. In addition, there were 6 exclusive maids standing neatly in the living room, seemingly welcoming the arrival of Longsha Jendi. Unlike Guhan's exclusive maids who were in their romantic years, the youngest of these 6 exclusive maids was already more than 50 years old, and the oldest had already turned grey, becoming an old woman with 1 foot in the grave. However, they still scrupulously performed their duties and maintained the most beautiful posture of exclusive maids, standing in the living room with perfect posture. Good. Longsha Jendi unconsciously nodded. He knew that these exclusive maids had accompanied Haotian Jendi all his life. The oldest of them was probably the one who had served and accompanied Haotian Jendi all his life when Haotian Jendi was still a fledgling 18-year-old ancient sword rank youngster, and finally aged into such an exclusive maid. In the face of such exclusive maids, even Longsha Jendi couldn't help but feel a bit of admiration from the bottom of his heart. Unlike Haotian Jendi, Longsha Jendi didn't have only 6 exclusive maids. After ascending the throne, Longsha Jendi didn't hide his desire in the slightest, and he had more than 100 exclusive maids. As for those exclusive maids who had initially followed Longsha Jendi had already let them go home. After all, these exclusive maids were already old, and their loose skin and wrinkled faces could no longer meet Longsha Jendi's requirements for beauty. Longsha Jendi no longer needed these exclusive maids, so naturally, he would let them go home. It was just that these exclusive maids had dedicated their best years to Longsha Jendi. When they grew old, perhaps they wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing, but in the end, they could only live alone and die alone, without anyone to accompany them. After all, they used to be Long Shijendi's women. Which man would dare to touch the women who used to belong to Long Shijendi? Your Majesty Haotian, I need an explanation. You must give me a clear explanation as to why you gave those 5 votes to that Lu Shihua. If you don't give me a clear explanation, I will burn down this small building of yours. Henceforth, I will sever all ties with your Yangjing city, and will no longer listen to any orders from the Sword Committee. If your Yangjing city wants to play, then go play by yourself. The Dragon Lion Sword Emperor quickly tossed aside his lament for these exclusive maidservants and said angrily to the Clear Sky Sword Emperor, "Don't be like this." Cough, cough. In a room with a closed door, Hao Tianjendi's increasingly weak voice sounded, "Your Majesty Longsha, this old man is already a man who is about to soar to the heavens. Why are you so angry? A man who is about to soar to the heavens? I see that you are manipulating everything behind the scenes. You are very powerful. Today, I want to see how you are going to soar to the heavens." Long Shijendi angrily roared and was ready to directly rush into Hao Tianjendi's room. "Your Majesty Longsha," Hao Tianjendi suddenly roared, "aren't you afraid of touching this old man's immortal ascension chi? If you really want to see this old man's current appearance, then come in, but don't regret it." Long Shijendi immediately stopped his impulsive footsteps, and at the same time, his face alternated between blue and white. He was extremely annoyed with his impulsive behavior just now. Indeed, his mind had been blinded by anger just now, and if he had really rushed in rashly, Long Shijendi did not want to follow in Hao Tianjendi's footsteps so early. "Then you must give me a reason, otherwise I will turn your Yangjing city upside down," Long Shijendi still said with some unwillingness. "The reason is very simple. Because Sword Immortal Shihua's master, Sword Immortal Hong Jun, returned our Yangjing city's innate sword lady to us, and in return, our Yangjing city promised to cast all the votes for Sword Immortal Shihua. Are you satisfied with this explanation?" Hao Tianjendi's voice became calm. "Satisfied?" Long Shijendi sneered, "This may really be one of the reasons, but don't try to fool me. You can never offend me for such a reason. Have you forgotten that there is still that existence behind me? It is also that existence's intention that I succeed you as the new supreme leader of mankind. Even if you are not afraid of my revenge, are you not afraid of the revenge of that existence?" Listening to the meaning of Long Shijendi's words, it seemed that there was another greater existence behind Long Shijendi, and this existence could even order and command Long Shijendi. If such news was leaked to the internet, perhaps it would cause a huge storm in an instant. "I am about to ascend to heaven. Even if that existence kills me, what do I have to fear?" Hao Tianjendi's voice was still calm. Moreover, even the Liunyan family did not come forward to oppose it, so what is there to be afraid of in Yangjing City? The Liunyan family. I really don't understand what they are thinking. Forget about that love-struck girl Liunian Ling. Fleeting Wooden Fish is clearly not dead. Why didn't they stop his granddaughter's action? Long Shijendi said with a pained expression. "It seems that you still don't know this news." After listening to Long Shijendi's words, Hao Tianjendi was obviously silent for a moment, and then with a somewhat trembling voice, he said a surprising fact, "The old guy Fleeting Wooden Fish is dead. Just a minute ago, he died in his room." "What? Fleeting Wooden Fish is dead?" Long Shijendi's eyes instantly widened like copper bells, simply unable to accept this fact. "Don't make wild guesses. Fleeting Wooden Fish is old, he is also more than 90 years old, and it is time for him to die, just like me." Hao Tianjendi's voice became increasingly weak. Chapter 1377. After a long silence, Long Shijendi asked coldly, "Did Fleeting Wooden Fish really die of old age? So what if he did? So what if he didn't? But at least this is Fleeting Wooden Fish's own choice." Hao Tianjendi said weakly. "All right, he even wants to make a move on the Fleeting family. I really don't know what that person is after." Long Shijendi sighed. Suddenly, his expression changed, and he said, "But this matter has nothing to do with that person. This time, it's still your problem. Why did you vote for that woman, Lu Shihua? You must give me an explanation. Why don't you understand the meaning of my words?" Who said that fleeting wooden fish's death has nothing to do with Lu Shihua? Hao Tianzhendi sighed. Even before his death, fleeting wooden fish did not tell fleeting Zhang about that person. No one in the fleeting family knows of that person's existence. Unless that person appears in person, he can forget about giving orders to the fleeting family. In this way, the fleeting family is completely out of that person's control. Fleeting wooden fish used his own life to win true freedom for his granddaughter, Liuyan Ling. The moment Liuyan Ling voted for Lu Shihua, fleeting wooden fish had to die, Hao Tianzhendi said. Then this is also the fleeting family's matter. What does it have to do with you? Long Shizhendi asked persistently. It seems that you have been completely blinded by fame and fortune, to the point that you can't see clearly what is happening behind the scenes. Hao Tianzhendi coughed a few times. What do you think of Lu Shihua's strength? What kind of achievements will he have in the future? Although he will definitely become an emperor sword-level sword wielder in the future, his strength is not that great. He is just relying on his bloodline. Long Shizhendi replied disdainfully. Then what about Guhan's strength? What if he ascends the throne and becomes an emperor sword-level sword wielder? Hao Tianzhendi then asked. Very strong. Long Shizhendi's expression suddenly turned serious as he said with a serious face, when he ascended the throne and became the Ocean Emperor, he was just a spirit sword-level swordsman. Although his strength was not as good as mine, I'm afraid it was not much different. Now that he has become an immortal sword-tier sword wielder, I am afraid that I will no longer be able to defeat him. Once he ascends to the throne, I'm afraid that even Zhe Tianzhendi won't be a match for him. Perhaps only Kanzu will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Didn't you think it through clearly? This sword Immortal Hong Jun's current strength is already comparable to yours. He helped his disciple to the top. What are you dissatisfied with? Hao Tianzhendi said after coughing for a few more days. This is what I'm most angry about. Long Shizhendi clenched his teeth. If Sword Immortal Hong Jun comes in person, he can run for the position of chairman of the Sword Committee headquarters. Although I, Long Shizhendi, am unwilling, I am also convinced that he indeed has the strength to sit in this position. But why did he help his disciple to the top? Does he want to humiliate me like he used his disciple to humiliate those old guys in Yuzhang City? Long Shizhendi finally said the most resentful words in his heart. You are gravely mistaken. 3 days ago, this sword Immortal Hong Jun came to me and told me that for a long time, he will go to a place, and perhaps he will never come back, so he hopes that I can support his disciple. Hao Tianzhendi said. Where is he going? Hearing Hao Tianzhendi's words, Long Shizhendi's face instantly revealed a curious expression. In this world, besides the heavenly court, is there any place that sword Immortal Hong Jun will never come back? What if this place is the Seamless Corridor? Hao Tianzhendi said after a moment of silence. Seamless Corridor. Long Shizhendi's body could not help but tremble, and he cried out involuntarily, what is he going to do in that damned place? Does he want to court death? He is going to save Ul. Hao Tianzhendi's voice began to fade rapidly, and finally became so weak that it could not be heard clearly. Hey, Senior Hao Tian, don't say half of what you are saying. You have to make things clear to me. Long Shizhendi found that he could not hear what Hao Tianzhendi was saying, and suddenly became extremely anxious, and could not help but urge loudly. But no matter how Long Shizhendi urged, there was no longer any sound in the room. Wait, this guy can't be. Long Shizhendi suddenly thought of something, and immediately turned around, and said to Hao Tianzhendi's personal maids, who were standing in a neat line in the living room, hurry up and go in. I am afraid your master is in danger now. Hurry up and go in to take care of him. No need. The oldest personal maid, who was the leader, raised her head, looked at Long Shizhendi with a calm expression, and said, Long Shizhendi, before you came, Master had already told us that today is the day he will ascend to the immortal realm. None of us should disturb him, and let him ascend to the immortal realm quietly. Damn it. Why do you want to ascend to the immortal realm today? Could it be that this is also part of that person's plan? Long Shizhendi clenched his fists and said with extreme unwillingness. Your Majesty Long Shi, Master actually has a message for us to convey to you. The personal maid then said. What is it? Tell me quickly. Long Shizhendi said loudly. Long Shizhendi, Please take the overall situation of the 8 major base cities as the most important thing, and the overall situation of mankind as the most important thing. Do the most correct thing. The moment the personal maid's voice fell, the whole house began to shake violently, and a dazzling golden light suddenly shot out from the room where Hao Tianzhendi was. The speed of this golden light was so fast that even an immortal sword-grade swordbearer would find it difficult to capture it. Only an emperor sword-grade swordbearer like Longsha Zhendi could clearly see that golden light. Congratulations to Master for ascending to the immortal realm. Congratulations to Master for ascending to the immortal realm. The 6 personal maids of Hao Tianzhendi knelt down at the same time and sang in a loud and clear voice. At the same time, bright red blood flowed down from their facial orifices. In just a few seconds, these personal maids fell to the ground like clay figurines, without a trace of vitality. Hao Tianzhendi, you son of a bitch. You actually used your own life to plot against me. Longsha Zhendi looked up to the sky and sighed, 2 drops of tears falling from the corners of his eyes. A minute later, Longsha Zhendi appeared on the ceremonial platform and applauded Lu Shihua at the same time. It was not until an hour later that all humans learned of 2 pieces of shocking news. Fleeting Wooden Fish, the hometown of the Fleeting Time aristocratic family, and Hao Tianzhendi of Yangjing City, had passed away in less than 10 minutes. There was no longer the existence of Fleeting Wooden Fish and Hao Tianzhendi, the 2 existences whose prestige had been awe-inspiring for decades. Mankind seemed to have stepped into the most dangerous situation, because from this day on, there was only one Emperor sword-grade swordbearer. This was also a situation that had never happened in 1,000 years of history. From this day on, a new page had been turned in the history of mankind. In the ruins of the original Sichuan province's CD city, the extremely prosperous human metropolis of 1,000 years ago had disappeared without a trace. Even the remaining ruins could not be found. Instead, a large group of palaces with classical architectural style replaced it. This group of palaces was called Weiyang Palace. From the name, it could be heard that this was a group of palaces in the style of the ancient Han dynasty. In fact, the owner of this group of buildings was also famous. In the Martyr's Palace, he was known as the King of Benevolence and Righteousness, the Eon-grade Yuan Ku, Liu Bei Liu Xuanda. Liu Bei Liu Xuanda had been in this world for 800 or 900 years. During the long period of fighting, humans gave Liu Xuanda the title of the strongest Eon-grade Yuan Ku, which meant that humans recognized Liu Xuanda as one of the strongest Eon-grade Yuan Ku. After coming to this world, Liu Bei Liu Xuanda returned to CD City, where he had been the emperor. On the ruins of CD City, he reused a lot of manpower to build a large new group of palaces in Weiyang Palace. After that, Liu Bei and Liu Xuanda stayed in the Weiyang Palace for more than 800 years, until today. Recently, however, Weiyang Palace was not peaceful. Every day, the sound of bowls smashing could be heard, as well as roars that sounded like thousands of tigers roaring at the same time. However, this roar did not come from the real tigers. Instead, it came from the second master of Weiyang Palace, Liu Bei's sworn brother, Yuan Ku Zhongfei, who was also at the Eon grade. Everyone in the world knew that Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhongfei were 3 sworn brothers. The 3 of them appeared in this world at the same time, and the 3 Liu Bei brothers were also one of the founders of the Martyr's Palace. Back then, the Martyr's Palace was founded by the 3 Liu Bei brothers and some other human heroic spirits, and the 3 brothers' relationship was known to the world. Guan Yu originally lived in Weiyang Palace. This was because the Glastonbury stronghold needed a stronger defense, so after a meeting of the higher-ups of the Martyr's Palace, they decided to send Guan Yu to assist in the defense of the Glastonbury stronghold. In the end, Guan Yu never returned, and he died at the hands of Longsha Zhendi. With his good brother dead, the Weiyang Palace naturally couldn't be at peace. Zhongfei would fly into a rage in the palace every day. There wasn't a day when he wasn't like this. Big brother, don't stop me. Tomorrow is the day those humans are electing some chairman of the Sword Committee. That Guhan who killed second brother will definitely appear there. I'm going to Yangjing City to kill him and avenge second brother. Zhongfei's face was red as he brandished his spear. Third brother. This matter needs to be discussed at length. That Guhan must be hiding in Yangjing City right now. How can you harm him? Why don't you wait for Big Brother to gather more information and follow that bastard out of Yangjing City? It won't be too late for us to kill him then. Liu Xuande tried to persuade him. There's no need to go to Yangjing City. Aren't I here now? As Liu Bei was trying to persuade him, a thunderous voice suddenly came from outside Weiyang Palace. Chapter 1378. Following Guhan's words, a figure dressed in black slowly walked into Weiyang Palace. In the end, he stood before Zhong Fei and Liu Bei. The moment Zhong Fei laid eyes on this man in black, he became extremely excited. His eyes turned red. Ever since Guan Yu's death, Zhong Fei had been looking at the pictures of Guhan and Long Shijiendi every day before he fell asleep. His goal was very simple. He wanted to firmly remember the faces of the two murderers of his second brother so that he could avenge him in the future. Thus, Zhong Fei was able to immediately recognize that this man in black was one of his second brother's murderers, Guhan. Hey! You are the thief who killed my second brother, Guhan? Fight me, your grandpa Zhong Fei, for 300 rounds. Watch as I, your grandpa Zhong Fei, take your wretched life with a flip of my hand. Zhong Fei shouted at the man in black. Beside him, Liu Bei and Liu Xuande's expressions changed several times. Liu Bei was not like Zhong Fei, who was impulsive. Especially when his second brother, Guan Yu, was killed, Liu Bei threw his brain to the side, leaving only his blood. On the contrary, as an emperor and one of the founders of the thick black study, Liu Bei began to feel somewhat uneasy. According to the information gathered by the Martyr's Palace, Guan Yu was killed by Long Shijiendi. Guhan was only there to restrain Guan Yu. As one of the strongest Eon rank Yuan Ku, Liu Bei had sparred with Guan Yu countless times. He believed that it would not be a problem for him to restrain Guan Yu. In fact, he could even do a better job than Guhan. At that moment, Zhong Fei was beside Liu Bei. The brothers were of one mind. With two Eon rank Yuan Ku cooperating with each other, Liu Bei was 100% confident that he could kill Guhan and avenge his second brother. There were no other possibilities. At that moment, Liu Bei did not know that Guhan had become a celestial sword wielder. The news had only spread among the upper echelons of humanity and a portion of the sword wielders. It would only be announced to the public one day later during the meeting of the Sword Committee. Therefore, although Guhan had become an immortal sword wielder a few months ago, almost no one in Yuan Ku knew about this. Logically speaking, Liu Bei should not be feeling any unease. And yet, Liu Bei was feeling extremely uneasy. The reason for that was simple. Guhan was no fool. Guhan would be able to think of anything that others could think of. Why would he take such a huge risk and come to the Weiyang Palace to find her? That was why Liu Bei could only guess one thing. This Guhan might have broken through to become a spirit sword tier sword wielder and become an immortal sword tier sword wielder, but was that really possible? Guhan was only 23 years old. So, there had never been an immortal sword tier sword wielder of such a young age. Liu Bei was indeed an ambitious and ruthless person. Just from the little information he received about Guhan, he was able to deduce that Guhan might become an immortal sword tier sword wielder. Second brother, let's go. We need to return to the Martyr's Palace right now. Liu Bei was an extremely cautious person. After confirming that Guhan might become an immortal sword tier sword wielder, he immediately prepared to bring Zhong Fei back to safety. At that moment, however, Zhong Fei, whose eyes had turned bloodshot upon seeing his enemy, could not possibly listen to Liu Bei's words. He swung the Zhonglong spear in his hand and stabbed it towards Ji Yuhan's glabella. At the same time, a massive black dragon emerged from the Zhonglong spear's tip to wrap around the Zhonglong spear. It was as though Zhong Fei had stabbed a black dragon into Guhan's body. The might of the attack was unparalleled, as though it was capable of destroying the world. Third brother, your martial arts skills have improved again. Even I would have to dodge this attack. Although Liu Bei was feeling worried, he could not stop himself from nodding and praising Zhong Fei. In the next second, however, Liu Bei's face turned as black as a pig's face. In the face of Zhong Fei's overwhelming attack, Guhan calmly pulled out a sword from his scabbard. Then, He lightly tapped the black dragon's forehead with the tip of the sword. The black dragon, which had been unparalleled in might just moments ago, became like ice under the scorching sun. It rapidly melted away. As for Zhong Fei, his face turned red and he instantly coughed out a mouthful of black blood. It would appear that Gu Han's attack had not only unraveled Zhong Fei's attack, it had also channeled the power behind the spear into Zhong Fei's body. That was why Zhong Fei could not stop himself from coughing out a mouthful of black blood. "Don't you dare harm my third brother." Seeing that, Liu Bei felt even more uneasy. However, Liu Bei knew that he had to take action. Otherwise, his third brother might follow in his second brother's footsteps and die to Gu Han. "Big brother, although we cannot fight Liu Biyu together like we did back then, today, let us fight side by side and avenge second brother. But today, let's fight side by side and avenge second brother," Zhong Fei said with bloodshot eyes when he saw his elder brother waving his dual swords and joining the battlefield. Hearing the story of how the three heroes fought Liu Biyu, Liu Bei could not stop himself from becoming excited. He completely let go of the uneasiness in his heart and raised his twin swords high up into the sky. A golden light shone down from the tip of the swords onto Wei Yang Palace. The instant the golden light shone down, countless bodies of flesh and blood crawled out from the ground and rapidly assembled into ranks. In the end, under the command of twofold swords, an army of over 10,000 soldiers appeared. From the moment Liu Bei raised the twofold swords in his hands, the entire process took less than 5 seconds. The army under Liu Bei's command was known as the White-Eared Elite Soldiers. They were Liu Bei's personal bodyguards back then. Every single one of them possessed combat power equivalent to that of a dragon-class Yuan Ku. When these Soul-class Yuan Ku gathered together, under Liu Bei's command, they could unleash combat power equivalent to that of 10 Eternity Yuan Ku. This was one of the reasons why Liu Bei was able to become the most powerful Eternity Yuan Ku. Brothers, charge! As Liu Bei's sworn brother, Zhong Fei naturally had the authority to command the White-Eared Elite Soldiers. When he saw the White-Eared Elite Soldiers charging toward Gu Han like a tidal wave, Zhong Fei immediately felt that victory was certain. Up until now, no sword-bearer who was not an Emperor sword could survive the siege of the White-Eared Elite Soldiers. No matter how many pieces of trash there are, what's the use? Looking at the densely packed White-Eared Elite Soldiers, Gu Han did not care about them at all. With a shake of the Celestial Slayer sword in his hand, countless golden stars spread out in all directions with Gu Han at the center. Any White-Eared Elite Soldier that came into contact with the stars would instantly vaporize, turning back into a pile of dirt and falling to the ground. With just one move from Gu Han, Chaos Stars, more than 30% of the White-Eared Elite Soldiers were finished. What a terrifying area of effect ability! Seeing that, Liu Bei could not help but turn pale with fright. The twin swords in his hands quickly issued out a new command. The White-Eared Elite Soldiers immediately gave up on attacking Gu Han. Instead, they charged toward Zhong Fei. The instant the White-Eared Elite Soldiers made contact with Zhong Fei's body, they melded into Zhong Fei's body. When all the White-Eared Elite Soldiers had entered Zhong Fei's body, Zhong Fei's entire body was 3 times bigger. His entire body was filled with explosive muscles, and his entire body's power was more than 10 times that of Zhong Fei's. This was the ultimate use of the White-Eared Elite Soldiers. They could enter their companions' bodies and strengthen their companions' abilities in all aspects. Under Liu Bei's full command, Zhong Fei's strength had increased by more than 7 times. Unfortunately, 30% of the White-Eared Elite Soldiers had been killed by Gu Han. Otherwise, Zhong Fei's strength would have increased by more than 10 times. Knave! Return my big brother's life. After being strengthened, Zhong Fei brandished his 1/8 Zhong long serpent lance at Gu Han once more. This time, however, Zhong Fei's attack was not interrupted by a single sword attack from Gu Han. At the same time, he also suffered from internal injuries. This time, Zhong Fei and Ji Yu had engaged in an intense hand-to-hand battle. One of them was a famous super warrior in the history of Hua Xia, while the other was the strongest swordsman since the Great Calamity. The battle between the two of them immediately entered a white-hot state, and in the blink of an eye, they had already exchanged over 50 blows. Awesome! Awesome! Zhong Fei shouted loudly as he fought crazily, Although you are the thief who killed my second brother, I have never seen such a powerful sword technique like yours. Awesome. This fight is simply too awesome. Because of this sword technique of yours, I will definitely leave your corpse intact. You are awesome. But I am a little bored. What made Zhong Fei, who was in the middle of an intense battle, almost choke to death was that Jiyu Han did not show the slightest bit of excitement. Instead, he revealed a somewhat lazy expression, as if he did not bring out his true strength to fight with him. Kill him. The enraged Zhong Fei once again exploded with even more power. He wanted to kill this foul-mouthed fellow right here and now. Forget it. It's getting late. I'm not going to play with you anymore. Gu Han yawned. The sword in his hand changed in an instant. A power that seemed to be able to distort the entire world instantly enveloped the battlefield. Under the shroud of this power, Zhong Fei only felt that his 5 senses had become blurry. He could not even tell the difference between north and south. When everything returned to normal, Zhong Fei was horrified to find that his hands had been forcefully slashed to the ground by Gu Han. The 1.8 Zhong-long serpent lance that was like a black dragon had been broken into 2 and fell to the ground like 2 pieces of scrap metal. Zhong Fei, whose strength had been enhanced by 7 times, did not even know what had happened. He had already been defeated by Gu Han. Third brother. Your big brother is coming to save you. In the end, Liu Bei still had a bit of brotherly camaraderie. At that moment, he did not turn tail and run. Instead, he bravely brandished his twin swords and charged at Gu Han with a desperate look on his face. Do me a favor and I will spare your third brother's life. Gu Han said coolly. Very well. Liu Bei slammed on the brakes and sheathed his twin swords. With a sincere look on his face, he nodded his head. Chapter 1379. You want to go to the seamless corridor? After hearing Jiyu Han's objective, a look of shock appeared on Liu Bei's face, which was as thick as vellum. That's right. Gu Han nodded. You are royal Uncle Liu. Can you bring me into the seamless corridor? If I had known that your goal was to go to the seamless corridor, I would have brought you there even if I didn't hold third brother hostage. Liu Bei let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he looked at Gu Han with extreme curiosity. The seamless corridor is deep within the core of the Martyr's Palace. Do you really have the guts to follow me in? That is a place that even Jendi can't return from. It's fine. Gu Han said calmly. Then let's go. Liu Bei opened a void door. Without any hesitation, Gu Han walked into the void door. The Martyr's Palace's headquarters was located in a dimensional space. Without guidance, it would be very difficult to find the location of the Martyr's Palace's headquarters. That was why Gu Han had gone to CD City to look for Liu Bei. He hoped to use this big shot to enter the Martyr's Palace's headquarters. Under Liu Bei's guidance, Gu Han arrived at the world's highest peak, Mount Everest. The entrance to the Martyr's Palace's headquarters was at the peak of Mount Everest. This was the world's highest peak that humans had to carry large amounts of equipment and risk their lives to reach. Now, in the blink of an eye, the 3 of them had reached the peak of the Martyr's Palace. This is the entrance to the Martyr's Palace's headquarters? Gu Han asked curiously as he looked at the unparalleled scenery around him. Hihi, yes and no. Liu Bei smiled and shook his head. Our Martyr's Palace has only left a mark here. After opening the Dimensional Rift's door, you can use this mark to reach the Martyr's Palace in the Dimensional Rift. Oh. Then aren't you afraid that I will bring people to the Martyr's Palace's headquarters from here? Gu Han asked curiously. It's fine. Once you arrive at the Martyr's Palace, this sign will naturally be replaced. This door can't be used a second time, Liu Bei said indifferently. Besides, it's not like you humans haven't killed your way into our Martyr's Palace before. In the end, aside from your Jendi, everyone else died in our Martyr's Palace. If you want to come, then come. We welcome you with open arms. After Liu Bei finished speaking, he looked at Zhong Fei beside him and said, Third brother, open the door for little friend Gu Han. Big brother, do you really want to bring this thief to our Martyr's Palace? Zhong Fei angrily asked Liu Bei. Although he had been defeated by Gu Han several times, Zhong Fei did not give Gu Han the slightest bit of respect. His face was dark the entire time. If it weren't for the fact that he really couldn't beat Guhan, he would have definitely fought with Guhan. Zhongfei's limbs had been chopped off by Guhan, and even his Zhonglong serpent lance had been broken. However, for the infinity rank Yuan Ku, it was not a serious injury. As long as his core divinity was undamaged, he could recover from those injuries in a short amount of time. Even his weapon could be restored to its original state. Second brother, Big Brother only agreed to Guhan's request to save you. Since Big Brother has already made a promise, you won't let Big Brother go back on his word, will you? Liu Bei looked at Zhongfei with a somewhat sorrowful expression. Big Brother. Zhongfei gave Liu Bei an affectionate look. Without another word, he brandished the Zhonglong serpent lance in his hand. 4 black dragons danced around the Zhonglong serpent lance. In the end, the space around the Zhonglong serpent lance began twisting and spinning. In the end, a vortex appeared in the air, expanding until it was the size of a human body. This is clearly a dimensional vortex. Seeing the vortex take shape, Guhan exclaimed in disbelief. He did not think that there would be someone else in Yuan Ku capable of using their own power to open a dimensional vortex. Big Brother. The door is already open. It was obvious that opening a dimensional vortex was an extremely energy-consuming task. After Zhongfei opened the dimensional vortex, he seemed to be out of shape from exhaustion. His entire body was drenched in sweat. Are you very tired? Seeing Zhongfei gasping for breath, Guhan asked with a smile. You dare mock me? Hearing Guhan's words, Zhongfei was instantly enraged. Brandishing the Zhonglong serpent lance in his hand, he shouted, Come at me if you can. I think you don't even know how to open a dimensional vortex. It is true that I do not know how to open a dimensional vortex like you. However, I do know an even more energy-efficient method. Guhan said with a smile. Tui, what are you bragging about? I have tried opening a dimensional vortex countless times. This is the most energy-efficient method. There is no other method in this world that is more energy-efficient than mine. Zhongfei grew even more furious. He would not allow anyone to doubt his strength. If you can find a more energy-efficient method, I will give you this Zhonglong serpent lance and my life. Otherwise, you will kneel before my second brother's coffin and kowtow to him 1,000 times. Then, I will use my spear to dig out your heart and liver to pay tribute to my second brother's soul in heaven. There is no need for that bet. All I want to say is, if we only need to open a dimensional vortex, we can just find a mouse-class Yuan Ku and bring him here to kill him with a spear. Wouldn't a dimensional vortex appear? Zhongfei's dark face instantly turned red. He sadly discovered that he was unable to refute Guhan's words. It seemed that killing the lowest class Yuan Ku would be much faster. Compared to using 60% of his strength, it was both comfortable and energy efficient. Moreover, it was extremely fast. There were no flaws in this method. I admit defeat. In the end, Zhongfei powerlessly lowered his head and admitted defeat. Second brother, don't listen to this human's nonsense. No matter how weak Yuan Ku may be, he is still alive. He is also our ally. We are benevolent and righteous people. How can we use the life of our ally for this convenient method? Humans have always said that we are evil. Now, it seems that they humans are the most evil of all. Liu Bei said righteously. Big Brother is right. This little brother is wrong. Zhongfei wholeheartedly said to Liu Bei. If I may ask, Imperial Uncle Liu, is this Cao Cao also your ally? Guhan suddenly asked. Cao Cao is a traitor of my Han dynasty. I, Liu Bei, cannot coexist with him. Liu Bei gripped the hilts of his twin swords and said with a face full of grief and indignation. Guhan finally understood why Liu Bei could become one of the strongest universe-class Yuan Ku in the world. Please. At that moment, the dimensional vortex had already opened up to its limit. Liu Bei made an inviting gesture and took the lead to enter the dimensional vortex. Zhongfei followed behind Guhan. Seeing that Guhan did not immediately enter the dimensional vortex, he immediately said with disdain, What is it? Are you afraid that my big brother will leave you inside the dimensional gap and let you get lost inside forever? I am just thinking. In your big brother's heart, Who is more important, me or you? Guhan said with narrowed eyes. Of course it's me. Why would my big brother care about a thief like you? Zhongfei said with a sneer. Then, he walked into the dimensional vortex. Guhan immediately followed closely behind Zhongfei, practically walking side by side with him. This is the world beyond the dimensional wall. After entering the dimensional gap, Guhan looked at the scene before him with some enchantment. The world here was different from the pure white void. The world between the dimensions was a colorful world. Furthermore, the colors were constantly changing. It was as though he was in a sea of neon lights. Behind Guhan was a soap bubble the size of a building. The vortex he had just emerged from had already begun to slowly close up. Finally, it completely disappeared into the soap bubble. Following the disappearance of the vortex, the soap bubble seemed to have been pierced by a sharp object. The entire soap bubble disappeared in an instant. Upon seeing the soap bubble disappear, Liu Bei suddenly recited a short poem with a sigh. Entering the dimensional gap is as deep as the sea. From then on, the world is no more. Little friend Jiyu Han, the dimension wall of Earth has disappeared. If the two of us were to sacrifice our lives, I'm afraid a human genius like you would be completely lost in the dimension gap. Liu Bei looked at Jiyu Han in front of him and said with an extremely sharp gaze. Guhan understood what Liu Bei meant. Now that he had entered the legendary dimensional gap, it was a place where even Kanzu would be completely lost. The soap bubble just now was actually the legendary dimensional wall. If he wanted to return to Earth, he had to find the soap bubble that belonged to Earth. However, every soap bubble in the dimensional gap was constantly changing. Just like what Jiyu Han had seen just now, it would be punctured in an instant. If he wanted to find the soap bubble that belonged to Earth again, only these Yuan bandits in front of him could find it through some special marks and methods. If Liu Bei and Zhongfei were truly determined to die and didn't take Jiyu Han to search for the Martyr's Palace or return to Earth, instead floating in the dimensional gap, Jiyu Han would be forever lost in this neon-like space like Sword Ancestor unless she had the luck to find a soap bubble that belonged to Earth. Otherwise, she would be forever lost in this neon-like space like Sword Ancestor. In the face of Liu Bei's threat, Guhan showed no signs of fear. Instead, he calmly asked Liu Bei, Imperial Uncle Liu, do you know that there are over 30 Eon Yuan Ku on Earth who belong to the Martyr's Palace? Why did I seek out your Imperial Uncle Liu instead of the others? Why? Hearing Guhan's words, Liu Bei could not help but frown. He did not know why Guhan sought him out. Did he look like the easiest one to bully? Actually, there's no other reason. It's just that you, Imperial Uncle Liu, have the most kind of character and are famous for being a benevolent and righteous monarch. Furthermore, you're a modest gentleman who values your reputation more than your own life. I believe that Imperial Uncle Liu will definitely not go back on his word and risk his own life to get lost in this dimensional gap. Haha. Among the heroes of the world, only Guhan knows me. Liu Bei suddenly burst into laughter. Chapter 1380. Little friend Guhan, do you see the black line beneath your feet? Liu Bei, who had entered first, pointed at his feet. Guhan lowered his head and saw a black line extending into the distance. It was impossible to tell where the black line ended. Could this black line extend all the way to the headquarters of the Martyr's Palace? Guhan speculated. Little friend Guhan, you are indeed smart. Let's go. Liu Bei gave Jiyu Han a look of surprise. Then, he flew up along the black line. Jiyu Han and Zhongfei followed closely behind him. Soon, they had entered the dimensional gap. As they were flying, Guhan noticed that there were many dimensional walls that resembled soap bubbles within the dimensional gap. Guhan knew that each of these soap bubbles represented a brand new dimension, a brand new world. According to the information Guhan had, most of the dimensional spaces represented by soap bubbles were barren spaces without any life. Only around 1,000th of the dimensional worlds had life. These life forms formed the source of Yuan Ku's invasion. They were the source of all the disasters on Earth. Little friend Guhan, are you interested in these dimensional worlds? Seeing Guhan looking around, Liu Bei, who was flying in front, said sincerely, actually, What is so good about Earth? War was unbearable, and disputes were endless. It was no longer the perfect Earth. Little friend Jiyu Han, if you were to find a peaceful world with the singing of birds and the fragrance of flowers, then with your strength, you could easily become the king of that world. You could become the ruler of the entire world and rule over the billions of lives in that world. That would be an extremely simple matter. Why would you waste your youth and life on Earth? It really is as wonderful as Imperial Uncle said. Then, why don't you find a dimensional world to live in? Wouldn't this be a perfect way to fulfill Imperial Uncle's wish of reviving the Han dynasty and finding another Han dynasty? Guhan asked with a smile. Liu Bei was stumped by Guhan's rhetorical question. After being stunned for a moment, he said with a disappointed expression, "Revive the Han dynasty. If it is not that land, how can the Han dynasty be revived?" Following that, Liu Bei and Zhong Fei maintained complete silence. As for Guhan, he gained a deeper understanding of this world. However, to Guhan's surprise, he was unable to absorb or sense any sword essence in the dimensional gap. Guhan immediately communicated with his sword ladies and asked if they could absorb the sword essence in the dimensional gap. However, the outcome was the same. All the sword ladies were unable to sense the sword essence in the dimensional gap. This isn't right. If the dimensional vortex is really connected to the dimensional gap, there should be endless sword essence in the dimensional gap. Otherwise, where do the sword essence in our bodies come from? Jiyu Han muttered to himself in bewilderment. He had a vague feeling that there might be a great secret hidden in this question. As Guhan was pondering, a majestic palace complex gradually appeared before Guhan's eyes. The palace complex was mottled and withered, filled with the aura of time. At the same time, Guhan had mixed feelings as he looked at it. I didn't expect there to be such a majestic building in the dimensional gap. Your martyr's palace is truly powerful to be able to build such a majestic palace complex in the dimensional gap, Guhan said in awe as he looked at the majestic palace complex before him. Little friend Jiyu Han, you are mistaken. This palace complex is unlike the newly constructed Endless Palace, which was built after the Great Apocalypse. This is a true palace complex from before the Great Apocalypse. Rather, it would be more accurate to say that this is the palace complex from before the Great Apocalypse, the palace complex from before the Great Apocalypse with a history of 600 years, Liu Bei said smilingly. Could it be? You people, you guessed it right. Back then, all the major factions had moved their headquarters into the dimensional gap. However, the Heavenly Court brought their heavenly palace into this world. Jehovah also brought his heaven over. Tathagata also brought his Mount Tathagata. We have nothing. After much discussion, the few of us decided to move the palace complex in the old Yangjing city into this dimensional gap. That is how the Martyr's Palace headquarters you see now came into being, Liu Bei explained straightforwardly. No wonder our descendants never saw any traces of the Forbidden City when they went to Old Yang's palace. I thought it had been destroyed by your hands. I never expected your Martyr's Palace to move it here, Guhan said with a sigh. This was a secret that humans had never known. Aside from Drifting Goblet, Jendi, and some of his swordbearers, no one else had been fortunate enough to enter the Martyr's Palace headquarters. As such, no one knew that the Forbidden City was here. Follow me. Under Liu Bei's lead, Guhan nimbly entered the Martyr's Palace. The moment he stepped foot into the Forbidden City, Guhan had already made all the necessary preparations. Naturally, he did not believe that Liu Bei would not inform the Martyr's Palace headquarters of his arrival. Guhan believed that the moment he stepped foot into the Martyr's Palace, he would be attacked by the countless Yuan Ku inside. However, to Guhan's surprise, when he was about to enter the inner palace from the outer perimeter of the Forbidden City, not a single Yuan Ku jumped out to kill him. Although he noticed many pairs of eyes staring at him from the shadows, not a single one jumped out to fight him. Even when he arrived at the Palace of Compassionate Peace under Liu Bei's lead, not a single one of them took the initiative to show themselves. Are you wondering how we were able to arrive here safely? Seeing the look of surprise on Guhan's face, Liu Bei finally felt somewhat happy. On the way here, he had been suppressed by Guhan and seen through by Guhan. Now, There was finally a time when even Guhan could not see through him. What's so difficult about that? Guhan lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Then, he smiled and said, "It's just that this seamless corridor is a place where death is certain. No one has ever been able to leave this place alive. That is why you all believe that as long as I step into the seamless corridor, I will definitely die. That is why there is no need to risk your life to fight me. Am I right?" "Correct. That's it. I didn't expect you to see through this as well." Liu Bei sighed. He stared at the tightly shut gates of the Palace of Compassionate Peace in a daze and said, "It is as you guessed. This seamless corridor is a place where death is certain. Back then, our ancestor accidentally entered it and has never come out since. If you really want to enter, it will save us the trouble of dealing with you. Right now, you have two paths to choose from. You can either enter the seamless corridor and search for the item you want, or you can set up a battlefield here and see if you can be like Drifting Goblet and Jendi in the past and kill your way out of this place." As Liu Bei finished speaking, 5 figures appeared in the sky. Although the 5 figures were just illusory images, Guhan could sense the formidable power of laws emanating from them. Without question, all of them were primordial class Yuan Ku. They were also the strongest experts left behind to guard the headquarters. If Guhan wished to leave, he would likely have to defeat these primordial class experts. "Open the door. Since I'm here, I've been waiting for this moment for more than 3 years, Ji Yuhan said without hesitation. "Then, after you." Liu Bei pushed with his palm and the gates of the Palace of Compassionate Peace burst open. However, it was different from the luxurious residence of the legendary Empress Dowager. At present, there was nothing inside the Palace of Compassionate Peace. There was only a dark corridor leading deep into the Palace of Compassionate Peace. It would appear that this was the legendary seamless corridor. "Thank you." Guhan clasped his hands toward Liu Bei and prepared to enter the Palace of Compassionate Peace. "Wait." As Guhan stepped into the Palace of Compassionate Peace, Liu Bei, who was behind him, suddenly asked, "What are you looking for by entering the seamless corridor?" "A person." "Time." "A person." Guhan hesitated for a moment before answering. "Are you looking for Miss Artoria?" Liu Bei asked again. "Yes. It really is her." Liu Bei let out a long sigh. "Do you have any last words? I can help you convey them to the humans in Yuzhang City." "No need. When I bring her out, I will personally speak to my people." Guhan smiled. "In that case, I will wait for you to come out." Liu Bei finally shut his mouth and said nothing else. The moment both of Guhan's feet stepped into the seamless corridor, the Palace of Compassionate Peace that was behind Guhan completely disappeared. Other than the faint purple light, there was only the corridor beneath Guhan's feet, with no end in sight. It was a corridor that could only allow 3 people to walk side by side. It was very narrow. Additionally, there were no railings on either side of the corridor. One wrong step and they would fall into the bottomless abyss on either side of the corridor. Standing in the corridor, Guhan had once gazed deeply into the bottomless abyss on either side of the corridor. As a result, Guhan felt an immense fear that he had not felt ever since he became a sword-bearer. It was a fear that seemed capable of devouring Guhan. Only when Guhan turned his gaze away from the bottomless abyss and returned it to the corridor beneath his feet did Guhan break free from that fear. "Qingpin. Duyu. Heavenly Reliance." Ji Yuhan began to call out the names of his sword maidens, attempting to free them from their state of being sword maidens. But what caused Ji Yuhan to feel despair was that in this seamless corridor, his connection with his sword maidens had been completely severed. Although his Zifu and sword scars were still there, the consciousness of his sword maidens had disappeared without a trace after entering the seamless corridor. It was as though they had never existed in the first place. At present, Guhan was truly alone. Chapter 1381. A month's worth of time. A full month's worth of time. Guhan had been walking through the seamless corridor this entire time. During this month, Guhan had been advancing forward the entire time. Let alone meeting anyone, he hadn't even seen the slightest bit of different scenery. All he saw was forever the same corridor. Anyone who had spent time in the army knew that the most painful punishment wasn't corporal punishment, nor was it even a death sentence. The most painful punishment was solitary confinement. Locking someone up in a dark, gloomy room. Aside from his 3 daily meals, no one would speak to him. Aside from lying in bed, there was nothing else he could do. Even an iron-forged soldier, after 7 days of solitary confinement, would become a complete clown. As long as someone was willing to say a single word to him, he would be willing to pay any price he had to pay. Thus, even the most unbearable of thorns in the army, after 7 days of solitary confinement, would have their edges completely ground down, and they would become incomparably obedient. And the torture in the seamless corridor was even crueler than solitary confinement. No matter how long you were confined, you would be given a deadline, and you would be able to live an infinitely boring life in anticipation of the end of that deadline. Simply put, you would have something to look forward to. But Guhan was different. Ever since he had entered the seamless corridor, theoretically speaking, Guhan had already lost his chance to ever leave the seamless corridor. Guhan would forever be trapped within the seamless corridor, just like Artoria had been hundreds of years ago. Just the thought of this was enough to drive everyone crazy. But Guhan didn't. During this month, not only did Guhan not show any signs of going insane, his mental state was actually quite good. From time to time, he would even reveal a hint of a smile. He didn't look at all like he had been trapped in this terrifying place for an entire month. The reason was simple. Guhan hadn't come to the seamless corridor unprepared. In truth, Guhan had already guessed that the seamless corridor would be an extremely boring and empty place. Thus, Guhan had made preparations long ago. Guhan bought a copy of every physical book in the entire Yangjing City bookstore and placed it in his dimensional pocket. In addition, he downloaded more than 100,000 high-quality online novels through his personal terminal. During this month, whenever Guhan felt a little bored, he would take out a physical book from his dimensional pocket and immerse himself in the plot of the novel as he walked to pass the boring time. Thus, even though Guhan had already spent an entire month in the seamless corridor, Guhan's mind was still generally in a healthy state. He hadn't been crushed by this boring world. Another thing worth mentioning was that although Guhan had prepared a lot of food at the same time, it was enough for him to eat for more than 100 years. But in the world of the seamless corridor, the need for food had completely disappeared. During this month, Guhan didn't feel hungry at all. At first, Guhan thought it was just an illusion, that his body did need food. Thus, after Guhan forced himself to eat 3 meals, his stomach finally couldn't hold any more food, and all of it was vomited out by Guhan. Only now did Guhan believe that in the world of the seamless corridor, humans didn't need food. But this is good. If she can live without food, then Artoria's chances of survival will be even higher, Guhan said happily. Young man. Guhan didn't know how long he had spent in the seamless corridor. Suddenly, he heard an extremely joyful shout. Soon, Guhan saw a human figure rushing towards him at high speed. If it wasn't for the fact that he felt that this person didn't have any evil intentions, Guhan would have stabbed him with his sword long ago. Wonderful. After waiting for 3 years, I've finally met a living person. The figure immediately hugged Ji Yuhan's thigh and began to wail. His tears quickly wetted Ji Yuhan's trousers, and the figure asked quickly. So it's you, Guhan. This is great. You must have a lot of new novels on you, right? Let's hurry up and exchange. After we parted last time, I've collected 7 new novels. Let's exchange right now, okay? The person talked non-stop. Hundreds of words came out of his mouth in a minute, leaving Guhan no chance to interrupt. He could only let the person hug his thigh like this. Only after half an hour did the person slow down. He looked at Guhan unhappily and said, "Young man, why are you like this? I've already said so much, but you don't even reply to me. What kind of attitude is this? Are you deliberately trying to waste our precious time together? Can I finally speak? Who are you? Why do you know my name?" Guhan let out a long sigh of relief. It was the first time he met such a talkative person. The words that the other person said in this half an hour might be more than what he said in a year. And what made Guhan feel a little surprised was that the man in front of him seemed to know him. He could even take the initiative to say his name, but Guhan was very sure that he had never met this man before. So why did this man seem to be very familiar with him? You don't know me? The man looked at Guhan in surprise. After thinking for a while, he suddenly clenched his fist and said, This can't be the first time the two of us met, right? Of course, this is the first time the two of us met. Guhan was even more inexplicable. What the hell is this? Could it be that this man is a madman? No. This is definitely not the first time the two of us met. No, that's not right. To be precise, this is the first time you met me, but it's not the first time I met you. The man said quickly. Can I trouble you to say it more clearly? Guhan looked at the man in front of him and said with a frown. Guhan really couldn't understand what this man was talking about. You want to know the truth of the matter, right? You want to know why this is the first time you met me, but the fourth time I met you, right? You also want to know a lot of things in this seamless corridor, right? The man said excitedly, let's make a deal. You give me a novel, and I'll answer one of your questions. Also, buy 2 get 1 free. 2 novels can be exchanged for the answers to 3 questions. This is very cost-effective. Novel? Guhan was stunned. At first, he didn't understand what this man wanted a novel for. However, after all, Guhan was a smart man, and he quickly reacted. In this boring seamless corridor, even a strong-willed person like him needed a novel to pass the time, let alone the other people who lived here. In this seamless corridor, because one wouldn't feel hungry, food was no longer a necessity. What life really needed was mental sustenance, and as the simplest, most convenient, and easiest to carry mental sustenance, novels had perhaps become the most basic transaction currency in the seamless corridor. Speaking of novels, Guhan remembered that after ransacking all the bookstores in Yangjing City, he had stored hundreds of thousands of different novels in his dimensional pocket. A smile appeared on his face, and he took out a novel called The Witch's Guide to Krypton Gold from his dimensional pocket. This was a novel that Guhan had already finished reading. The content of the novel was quite interesting, but the author seemed to have stopped writing because he couldn't earn any money. It was just right for him to make a deal with this man. Give it to me. Seeing Guhan take out a novel, the man immediately pounced forward excitedly, wanting to snatch the novel into his hands. Of course, Guhan wouldn't let the man do as he wished. The sword essence in his body immediately condensed into sword chi, attacking the man's vitals. What Guhan didn't expect was that the man would actually use an extremely strange movement technique to avoid Guhan's sword chi, and instead, his palms carried a strong gust of wind as he attacked. However, this was just a casual strike from Guhan. Seeing that the strike didn't have any effect, he immediately used 70% of his strength and attacked the man again. This time, the man couldn't dodge in a leisurely manner. He could only retreat to avoid Guhan's sword chi. However, this also stopped the man's attack, and both sides returned to their previous state. Damn, Guhan, your strength was already so abnormal when you first entered the seamless corridor. This isn't fun at all. The man muttered unhappily. After that small battle just now, Guhan's expression also became extremely cautious. Even if this man's strength was inferior to his own, he was definitely at the peak of the universe level, Yuan Ku's strength. Moreover, although the man's palm technique was not as good as his chaos sword art, it was only a step away from the laws. As long as the man continued to train like this, sooner or later, he would reach the law's realm with his bare hands. At that time, he would be another primordial level Yuan Ku. All right, I'm not playing with you anymore. Time is precious. We have to separate in 20 minutes. Hurry up and ask me a question, then give me the novel. The man simply sat on the ground and said to Guhan anxiously, Why do we have to separate in 20 minutes? Can't we just stay like this? Guhan asked curiously. One question. The other party snatched the Witch's Guide to Pay to Win from Ji Yuhan's hands, then hurriedly stuffed it into his tattered clothes. He quickly explained, aside from the fact that the seamless corridor has no end, it also has another special characteristic. Every hour or so, it will distort space-time. At that time, 2 different lives will be sent to different places by the seamless corridor. There are still 20 minutes before the next space-time distortion, so after 20 minutes, the two of us are destined to separate. All right, There really isn't much time left. Hurry up and ask me the next question, the man urged anxiously. Chapter 1382. All right. My second question is, what's your name? Why have I never seen your face in Yuan Ku's name list? Guhan asked his second question. Guhan was indeed a little curious about the identity of this Yuan Ku in front of him. Since the other party's strength had already reached the universe level of Yuan Ku, then when the other party was active on Earth and had not yet fallen into the seamless corridor, he would definitely be able to make a name for himself on Earth. However, Guhan had never seen the same record as this Yuan Ku in front of him. This made Guhan a little curious. What a stupid question. Why would you waste your precious novel on such a question? That's so stupid. The other party grinned at Guhan, then snatched a new novel out of Guhan's hand. Only then did he say with a smile, "But this old man likes you, Guhan, being rich and overbearing. You're pretty good. This old man's surname is Hong. As for my name, I've already forgotten it. Because Master took in 7 disciples, this old man was ranked 7th, so everyone called this old man Hong Chi. Later, when I grew older and had a group of disciples and grand disciples, people no longer called this old man Hong Chi, but called me Hong Chigong." Hong Chigong? Guhan was stunned. He did not expect to meet Hong Chigong. It had to be said that the great cultural apocalypse had destroyed almost 99% of the world's culture, but there were always some things that were widely spread that had been left behind. For example, some of the most widely spread martial arts novels before the great cultural apocalypse had been passed down. Among them was a novel called The Legend of the Condor Heroes. It seemed that the Hong Chigong in front of him was the Hong Chigong from the world of The Legend of the Condor Heroes. It was no wonder that the other party's palm technique was so unfathomable. In the past, Hong Chigong's 18 dragon subduing palms was a martial art that Guhan was very envious of. So its old gang leader Hong. When Guhan was young, he had also watched The Legend of the Condor Heroes, a classic novel that was remade for the 187th time. Therefore, he casually said the title of old gang leader Hong. "Don't call me that. My beggar sect is gone. How can there be any old Master Hong? You can just call me Chigong," Hong Chigong said nonchalantly. He then extended his hand in front of Guhan and smiled cheekily. "Do you have any more novels? Are there any more questions? Ask them all." Of course. Guhan voluntarily pulled out a novel and placed it in Hong Chigong's hands. "Dare I ask, Chigong, have you ever met a young miss named Artoria in the seamless corridor?" "Artoria?" Hong Chigong thought about it seriously for a while, then shook his head and said, "I've never heard of it, nor seen it. By the way, don't you have something called a photo? Show me a photo and I might be able to recall it." "You're right. I didn't think of that." Guhan nodded, then projected a photo from his personal terminal. Hong Chigong squinted at it, then stretched out his hand and said, "This is the 4th question. Here." Guhan had no choice but to hand the 4th novel to Hong Chigong. "Didn't they say buy 2 get 1 free?" Hong Chigong put away the novel and immediately shook his head vigorously. "I've never seen her, never seen her." Guhan wanted to hit someone. "All right. Don't be angry, I'll give you a question." Hong Chigong was tactful. Seeing Guhan's unfriendly expression, and considering how much he wanted the novel in Guhan's hands, he pretended to be generous and said, "Actually, if you ask me if I've seen this little girl named Artoria, I can't really say. You might not have met the person you met now, but the next person you meet might have. After all, I've only been in the seamless corridor for 200 years. If you can meet an old guy who's been here for 700 or 800 years, then you might be able to find some clues. How many people like you are here?" Guhan thought for a while, then took out another novel and asked. "I can't say for sure, but I've only seen about 20 people in the past 200 years, including you. But according to Liu Bang from 800 years ago, he's seen about 60 to 70 people. That means there are at least 70 people trapped here." "Oh right. Liu Bang from 700 years ago also asked me to pass you a message on his behalf. He said that the next time you meet him, bring the 3rd volume of the Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber to him. He wants to read that book so much that he's going crazy. He used to weigh more than 180 pounds, but now he's only 150 pounds. He's really quite pitiful. Liu Bang from 800 years ago? Liu Bang from 700 years ago? And he's asking me for the third volume of the Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber? Guhan looked confused. He had no idea what Hong Qigong was talking about. But this wasn't the first time he was confused. When Guhan first met Hong Qigong, he already felt that something was wrong. Very confused, right? Doesn't it feel strange? Seeing the confused look on Ji Yuhan's face, Hong Qigong suddenly laughed happily. Come. This is a big question, the most important question in the seamless corridor. If you want to know the answer to this question, then you have to give this old man at least 3, no, 5 novels. Otherwise, you can go and guess for yourself. Pa. Without another word, Guhan took out 5 novels and threw them on the corridor. Damn it, I knew you had a good collection. My God, how many novels do you have on you? Hong Qigong looked at the 5 novels in front of him and started drooling. He hugged all of them into his arms and kissed each of them hard. Then, he started to explain in satisfaction. Actually, I said just now that this place changes time and space every hour. Please note that I said time and space, not space. This means that not only does space change, time itself is also changing. Hong Qigong sighed and said, whether it's space or time, they're all cut into pieces. Every hour, they'll be randomly messed up. The next time you see this old man, it'll be this old man in a random point of time. This old man isn't lying to you. This old man has indeed seen you 3 times before. 3 months after you entered the seamless corridor, 1 year after you entered, and 2 years after you entered. The 3 times I saw you were in the 78th year, the 98th year, and the 142nd year since I entered this corridor. Do you understand what I'm saying now? I understand. Guhan nodded with an ugly look on his face. Although Hong Qigong's words were a bit erratic and self-centered, given Guhan's intelligence, he naturally understood what Hong Qigong was saying. The seamless corridor truly was an incomparably marvelous place. On Earth, time flowed in a linear fashion, second by second, forming a straight line. Although there was a way to travel through space-time and return to the past, that was only for a single individual. The flow of time in the entire world was irreversible. But this seamless corridor was completely different. Time and space were no longer linear to the seamless corridor, they were piecemeal. The seamless corridor was like a world of building blocks that were arranged in a straight line, and each building block represented an hour of time. In a normal world, it would be very difficult for this straight line of building blocks to change. An external force might be able to move a speck of dust from one building block to another, but it would not be able to move the entire building block to a certain position. But the seamless corridor was different. Every hour, all of the building blocks that made up the seamless corridor would be completely disrupted by a pair of invisible hands, and then they would be pieced together into a completely new straight line. In this way, a building block that belonged to year 3022 would be placed in the position that belonged to year 2022, while the building block of year 2022 would appear in the position of year 2587. In short, all of time would be completely disrupted once, so the future Guhan might also encounter the past Hong Qigong. In terms of time, anything was possible. This question is indeed worth 5 novels. Thank you for telling me so frankly, Qigong. Otherwise, I would have been lost in this world. Guhan thanked Hong Qigong. This was indeed a very important piece of information, and it gave Guhan a whole new understanding of time in the seamless corridor. At the same time, it also gave Guhan an even more important piece of information. Since Hong Qigong said that he had encountered his future self, that meant that he had spent at least 2 years in this world of the seamless corridor. When he heard this piece of information, Guhan's heart thumped. According to Guhan's original plan, he had hoped to solve Artoria's problem within a year, but he didn't expect that it would already be 2 years. To Guhan, this was undoubtedly a huge blow. He didn't know what the human world would be like in 2 years. Could Liu Shihua really handle the task he had given her? Qigong, I have another question. Just as Guhan was about to ask Hong Qigong for guidance, the world of the seamless corridor suddenly began to flicker. This change was not too surprising to Guhan, because he could see such changes almost every hour. But Hong Chigong's expression suddenly changed, and he said unwillingly, "Hey, space-time is about to change again. It wasn't easy to meet a living person like you, but in the end, we have to separate again. This old man really wants to change a few more books." As soon as Hong Chigong finished speaking, he instantly disappeared in front of Guhan, and Guhan once again returned to being alone. Helpless, Guhan could only continue walking forward, hoping that he would be able to meet other people left behind in the seamless corridor. In the end, he walked for another month. And just as Guhan was feeling a little tired, a slender figure suddenly appeared at the end of the corridor, causing Guhan to become extremely excited. "That's Artoria's figure. There's no mistaking it, that's Artoria's figure," Ji Han muttered in his heart in surprise. Then, he sprinted forward, chasing after the figure of Artoria in front of him. After 4 years of waiting, Guhan had finally found that person. Chapter 1383. It's you. Looking at the man running towards her anxiously, Artoria obviously recognized Guhan. She quickly revealed a frosty expression and said, "Guhan, I've already said that I don't need you to save me. Don't bother me anymore. Even if I can't beat you, I don't need you to save me." Guhan was dumbfounded. In fact, this was the first time he met Artoria in real life, and it was also the first time he met her in the seamless corridor. He and Artoria hadn't exchanged a single word. How did he suddenly make her hate him? Guhan wanted to ask for an explanation, but at that moment, the space and time of the entire seamless corridor began to change again. When everything returned to normal, Artoria had already disappeared before Guhan's eyes. "It seems that although this is the first time I met Artoria, it's not the first time Artoria met me. The Artoria I met belongs to the future to me, and the current me is already a person of the past to Artoria." Guhan was not stupid. After a short moment of thinking, he understood what had just happened. He must have met the Artoria from the future. Compared to the Artoria from the past, something must have happened between the two of them. That was why Artoria was so disgusted with him. This discovery made Ji Han a little happy, but also a little worried. He was happy that he would definitely meet Artoria again in the future. On the other hand, he was worried that something would happen to him in the future that caused a conflict between him and Artoria. However, Ji Han believed that he would be able to explain this conflict to Artoria sooner or later. In the following time, Guhan wandered aimlessly for about a month before finally meeting a living person for the third time. But what Guhan did not expect was that the person he met this time was Hong Chigong again. But the Hong Chigong he met this time had become extremely weak. He was lying on the ground like a dead man. When Guhan walked to his side, he barely raised his head and looked at Guhan weakly. "Little brother, do you have a novel to read? Here you go." Guhan took out a novel from his dimensional pocket and gave it to Hong Chigong. Hong Chigong instantly became spirited. He picked up Guhan's novel and sat directly on the ground of the seamless corridor. He began to carefully read the novel in his hand word by word, completely ignoring Guhan. But what surprised Guhan was that Hong Chigong's reading speed was extremely slow. After 20 minutes, Hong Chigong had only read 2 pages of the novel. These 2 pages added up to less than 500 words. It took him 2 to 3 seconds to read each word, which meant that it would take him 20 minutes to finish. This two-dimensional empire is too badly written. The protagonist's character is too cowardly, and there's no depth to the writing. It's obvious that it was written by a person who often skipped work. Guhan had no idea how Hong Chigong deduced that the author of this two-dimensional empire was a writer who often skipped work based on the protagonist's character. But at least Hong Chigong had become normal. He was no longer weak and had become a normal person. "Thank you, little brother. If it weren't for your novel, I probably wouldn't have been able to stand the torture here and would have been ready to commit suicide. Although this novel is really badly written, and the names in it are too strange, as if they are all Japanese names," Hong Chigong said to Guhan gratefully. "It's okay. As long as I can help Senior Chigong," Guhan said with a smile. "Hey, you know my name, so this isn't the first time you've seen me?" Hearing Guhan say his name, Although Hong Qigong was a little surprised, he still spoke very normally. That's right, I met you 2 months ago. At that time, it was all thanks to you explaining the rules of this world to me. Otherwise, I would still be in the dark and not know anything, Gu Han said with a smile. I also told you about the rules of this world. Hong Qigong blinked his eyes. It seems that you must have met me in the future. By the way, which era did you meet me in? How was my life at that time? Are you living in pain? Of course, Qigong lived happily. At that time, Qigong was much more energetic than now, Gu Han said with a smile. That's good. It's good that you lived happily in the future. By the way, did the future me tell you how many years I entered this world? Hong Qigong continued to ask. I think it was more than 700 years, Gu Han replied after thinking for a while. What? Hearing Gu Han's answer, Hong Qigong was instantly stunned. He stayed in place for a few minutes, and his emotions broke down in an instant. He cried like a child. It's over. 700 years. I've actually stayed in this *TTY world for 700 years. It's over. I've been here for 78 years, and I'm about to commit suicide. I have to stay here for another 632 years. Well, that's not necessarily true. Maybe you'll meet me in the future 1,000 years later. Wow. I don't want to live anymore. I'll just jump down. After Hong Qigong finished speaking, he made a move to jump down from the corridor. Seeing this scene, Gu Han smiled and did not speak. He just looked at Hong Qigong, who was playing like a child. As a result, Hong Qigong could not continue acting. He looked at Gu Han with some annoyance and said, Kid, why don't you have any sympathy at all? Seeing an old man like me about to jump down, shouldn't you stop me and give me a novel to comfort me? Since I was able to meet Duke Qigong after 700 years, I believe that you must be living a happy life for at least the next 700 years. Of course, you wouldn't jump down from this corridor. Ji Yuhan laughed. Kid, why are you so cunning? You're even as cunning as my Huang girl. So annoying. It's not interesting at all. Hong Qigong was angry. He sat in the corridor and said gloomily. Please forgive me, Master Qigong. Take this book as my apology. Gu Han took out another novel and put it in front of Hong Qigong. Hong Qigong immediately smiled and hid the second novel in his arms. He patted Gu Han's shoulder and said, Good boy, you have a bright future. If I didn't only accept one disciple in my life, I would definitely teach you my 18 dragon subduing palms. Thank you for your kindness, Qigong, Gu Han said gratefully. At the same time, he asked curiously, Qigong, when did you enter the seamless corridor in the real world? That was 78 years ago. At that time. Hong Qigong immediately replied. That's not right. Qigong, that's not what I meant. Ji Yuhan hurriedly grabbed Hong Qigong's hand. I'm not asking you how long you spent in the seamless corridor. I'm asking you, when did you enter the seamless corridor in the real world? Oh, that's what you're asking. Hong Qigong nodded, but then he quickly shook his head. This old man truly doesn't know. I've only been in your world for a few days, but I was already sent into this damnable seamless corridor. Senior, did you meet someone strong enough to defeat you? Someone like me, a native of this world? Gu Han asked. No. It's not that I want to say this, but you natives here are just too weak. You have swords in your hands, but you still have to rely on women to fight. It's so embarrassing. If you natives were in my world, I would find a rope and hang you on a tree for 3 days and 3 nights. I'd let you know the basic morality of a martial artist. You're right, Qigong. Gu Han laughed awkwardly. Indeed, from a certain perspective, sword-bearers all had terrible endings. But you're different, little fellow. I can see that your body contains sword qi, and the strength of this sword qi is probably something that even Wang Chongyang couldn't compare to. You're definitely an absolute expert amongst the aboriginals. What a pity. If I were a few decades earlier, I would definitely fight you here. It's a pity that I don't think about anything other than reading novels. How can fighting be as interesting as reading novels? Hong Qigong sighed. Then how was Duke Qigong sent into the seamless corridor in the past? Ji Yuhan changed the subject. Sigh, I was ambushed by that old poisonous creature. Hearing Guhan's question, Hong Qigong immediately became furious. Back then, I had just come to your world through that crack. I didn't understand anything and walked in the mountains for a few days. I was so hungry that I saw a metal ox running on the ground, so I took the initiative to stop it. I wanted to ask you natives inside for something to eat. My goodness, dozens of beautiful women with long swords came down from inside. Without saying a word, they surrounded me and attacked me. They even called me a bandit. What kind of joke is this? I'd rather be a beggar than a thief or a woku pirate. In the end, I got into a fight with these beauties. Although there were a lot of them, and there were a few experts among them, they still weren't a match for me. I casually sent them flying, then swaggered off. Since they weren't willing to give me food, I didn't force them. It's just that I'm really hungry. I'm so hungry that I almost want to eat the leaves on a tree. In the end, I ran into that damned old poison. He said that we're all in this new world, so he won't harm you. He tricked me into going to the headquarters of the Martyr's Palace. I never would have thought that old poison would actually set up such a huge trap for me. He directly pushed me into this seamless corridor. Chapter 1384. Senior Qigong, this old poison creature is a friend of yours who came from the same world, and the two of you are actually both enemies and friends. Why would this old poison creature want to harm you? Guhan asked, somewhat puzzled. Actually, this old man isn't too sure either. Logically speaking, the old poison creature and I fought all those years ago was for the 9-yin manual. Now that the old poison creature has mastered the 9-yin manual, there shouldn't be any enmity between us. He has no reason to harm me, which is why I trusted him so much back then. But he still tricked me into entering the Palace of Compassionate Peace and the seamless corridor. It really doesn't make sense at all. But later on, this old man learned from others. So it turns out that every 10 years, the seamless corridor needs an expert on my level to serve as a sacrifice. Otherwise, the entire seamless corridor will suffer a backlash from the dimensional rifts, and in the end, it seems as though all of the dimensional rifts will be destroyed. But an existence like me isn't that easy to deal with. That's why, in order to obtain some sort of reward from the Martyr's Palace, that old poison creature tricked me into entering this world. That really is the old poison creature's style. When Hong Qigong said this, his expression was very calm, but probably only Hong Qigong himself knew how much pain he had suffered. So that's how it is. Guhan nodded thoughtfully. Right, Senior Qigong, apart from the sword-bearers in that carriage, did you meet any other native humans? Or did you hear any interesting stories from the old poison creature? Apart from those aborigines, I haven't seen any other aborigines. However, I did hear about this from old poison creature's mouth. Hong Qigong revealed a reminiscing expression. I remember the old poison creature once said that the experts of the Martyr's Palace seemed to have gone to some heavenly court for a meeting, so there were no experts in the Martyr's Palace. That old poison creature actually became one of the few experts in the Martyr's Palace headquarters. When Hong Qigong reached this point, another space-time warped, and Hong Qigong disappeared before Guhan. Guhan immediately took out his personal terminal and began to frantically search for information on it. Meeting? Or a meeting in the heavenly court? Guhan fell into deep thought. Suddenly, Guhan recalled that 800 years ago, during the era of Zhetian Zhendi, Yuan Ku had gathered an unprecedented amount of power to attack Yuzhong City in order to prevent it from being established. At that time, in order to coordinate the various factions, the experts of the Martyr's Palace and the other Yuan Ku factions had gathered in the heavenly court to discuss how to distribute their forces. This was also the only record of the experts of the Martyr's Palace heading to the heavenly court in large numbers. Following the failure of the attack, the Martyr's Palace had retreated first and had offended the other factions. The relationship between the major factions had also become tense. Later on, there were no more records of the experts of the Martyr's Palace entering the heavenly court in large numbers. As for whether such a thing had happened in secret, Guhan didn't know. However, the possibility of this happening wasn't high. Therefore, Guhan was almost certain that Hong Qigong had entered the Martyr's Palace around the time Yuzhong City was established. This also corresponded with the giant steel ball that ran on the ground that Hong Qigong had mentioned. This was because 800 years ago, humans hadn't yet mastered the technology of maglev flying cars. All means of transportation were still cars from before the apocalypse, which was why they ran on the ground. This is really interesting. I actually met Hong Qigong from 700 years ago. Did I return to 700 years ago, or did Hong Qigong come to 700 years later? Guhan narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself. What Guhan didn't expect was that just 3 days after saying goodbye to Hong Qigong, he would meet the third trapped Yuan Ku. Moreover, the other party also recognized him. As soon as they met, he intimately put his arm around his shoulder and enthusiastically called out, "Brother Guhan." This person's appearance was very familiar to Guhan. After thinking about it, he suddenly realized that this guy actually looked 50 to 60% similar to Liu Bei. "Brother Guhan, how come you don't recognize your big brother at all? We're the best of friends in the seamless corridor." The other party looked at Guhan with some surprise. In the end, he discovered that Guhan still had a confused expression on his face. Only then did he forcefully pat his head and say with some disbelief, "I say, my dear brother Guhan, this can't be the first time you've seen me, right?" "Well, this is indeed the first time I've seen you." Guhan nodded helplessly. "Haha. No wonder we've met more than a dozen times. How could we be old acquaintances? I've been wondering when the two of us would meet again. So it's at this time." The other party suddenly laughed out loud. "Then let me introduce myself. My name is Liu Bang, the hooligan from Pei County, so it's His Majesty the ancestor of Han." When Guhan heard Liu Bang introduce himself, he immediately said with some respect. At the same time, this also explained why the other party actually looked 70 to 80% similar to Liu Bei. It was because Liu Bang was his ancestor. Moreover, Guhan also remembered that he had heard Liu Bang's name many times from Hong Qigong. It seemed that Liu Bang was indeed trapped in this seamless corridor. Liu Bang was Yuan Ku, while Guhan was a human. Although their positions were innately opposite, there was no doubt that the other party was the ancestor of the Chinese Han. Therefore, although they were born to be enemies and were destined to fight to the death in the future, this did not prevent Guhan from maintaining respect for Liu Bang. Sigh. What ancestor of the Han dynasty? The thing I regret the most in my life is becoming the emperor. That's a boring position. After ascending to that position, the wife who helps you in difficult times is no longer your wife, but the queen. The kind and lovely son is no longer your son, but the crown prince. The friends who treat each other with sincerity are no longer your friends, but your subjects. The brothers who work together are no longer brothers, but rivals who want to kill each other. Therefore, the position of the emperor is the most boring and uninteresting, and also the worst position in the world. I'd rather be that hooligan from Pei County, living a life of idleness at home, than to ascend to that supreme position and end up alone," Liu Bang said with a sigh. This sounded very fake, but perhaps it was Liu Bang's heartfelt words. Perhaps only someone like Liu Bang, who had sat on the high and mighty throne, could say such words. "Come on. Since this is the first time we've met, as your brother, I'll give you a gift as a token of my appreciation." To Guhan's surprise, Liu Bang took out a dimensional pocket from his body, and then took out a thick book from the dimensional pocket and put it in Guhan's hand. Guhan did not look at the book, and his attention was firmly fixed on the dimensional pocket in Liu Bang's hand. Since the invention of the dimensional pocket, it was an item that could only be used by humans. At most, Yuan Ku could only use violence to destroy the dimensional pocket, but it was impossible for him to use it, because if he wanted to use the dimensional pocket, he must have sword essence, which was undoubtedly impossible for Yuan Ku. Are you curious about this? When Liu Bang saw Ji Yuhan staring intently at the dimensional pocket in his hand, an amused smile suddenly appeared on his face as he asked, "Do you want to know why I can use this dimensional pocket as a Yuanko?" "Of course." Guhan nodded. "If your majesty is willing to tell me the truth, Guhan is willing to exchange 10 novels. No, 20 novels for the truth." "Tut tut. You're really worthy of being our richest man, Sword Immortal Hong Jun. But I can't accept these novels from you, or I'll be too thick-skinned. The reason why I can use the dimensional pocket is because of a person's help. As for how he helped me, I can't tell you, but I believe you'll know the truth in the future. All right. Seeing Liu Bang's attitude, Guhan knew that he could not get any information from Liu Bang, so he simply nodded. At this time, the whole world began to change again. It seems that our first meeting is over. Brother, take this book, we'll definitely meet again. Liu Bei cupped his hands at Guhan and disappeared again with the transition of time and space, leaving only a novel in Guhan's hand as a witness to Liu Bang's existence. Only then did Guhan have a chance to carefully look at the novel that Liu Bang had left for him. As soon as he saw the name of the novel, Guhan trembled because this was not any other novel, but Investiture of the Gods, which Guhan had been searching for. Prior to this, Guhan had learned through various channels that Yuan Ku, who had caused a series of dimensional collapses in the human world, should be the legendary Saint Tongtian. Not only was Qingpin Tongtian's sword once the sword, but even the 4 fairy-slaying swords were Tongtian's weapons. The saint, who had surpassed the Emperor sword level, was also a power that existed in Investiture of the Gods. However, that was all Guhan knew. He did not know more about the story of Tongtian, the background of the world that existed in Investiture of the Gods, as well as various characters and experts. This was undoubtedly a huge problem for Guhan. Therefore, Guhan had wanted to get the original copy of Investiture of the Gods more than once, so that he could thoroughly understand the story of the entire prehistoric era of human beings through this novel. However, the impact of the great cultural destruction was too great. Even if Guhan borrowed Liu Shihua's privilege, he could not find any story about Investiture of the Gods at all. Just when Guhan was about to lose hope, he never expected that he could get the original copy of Investiture of the Gods from Liu Bang. For Guhan, this was probably worth more than 10 million hero coins. Therefore, in the following time, Guhan devoted all his energy to reading Investiture of the Gods. Chapter 1385. So that's how it is. After Guhan finished reading the entire Investiture of the Gods, he finally had a systematic understanding of the 6 saints in the world, as well as the origins of the heavenly court. Originally, with Guhan's intelligence, he would have been able to finish reading the entire Investiture of the Gods within 2 days. But in order to not let go of any details, Guhan spent nearly 15 days to carefully finish reading Investiture of the Gods. And during this process, Guhan met 2 other Yuan Ku who were lost in the seamless corridor. One was a peerless expert named Heretic God of Fire Cloud, and the other was a Japanese called Yinsha Sokota. These 2 seemed to have met Guhan before, and they even warmly greeted Guhan. Guhan learned some information from them, and he knew that they were sent into the seamless corridor as sacrifices around the years 2600 and 2700 AD. Both the Heretic God of Fire Cloud and Yinsha Sokota were extremely powerful. At the very least, they had the power of a universe-level bandit. But according to what Yinsha Sokota had said, he was the weakest of all the people he had met in the seamless corridor. In other words, the lowest power limit for the sacrifices was the Yun-level Yuan Ku. This also explained one of the biggest questions in Guhan's mind. Why did so many outstanding Yun-level Yuan Ku suddenly disappear without a trace, and there were no records of humans killing them? Now it seemed that these Yuan Ku were all thrown into the seamless corridor as sacrifices. But this also made Guhan even more curious. What kind of existence was the seamless corridor? It actually forced the Yuan Ku to throw a powerful Yuan Ku into it as a sacrifice every 10 years. And Guhan also asked the 2 people he met, but they both shook their heads, saying that apart from knowing that if they didn't throw in sacrifices, the seamless corridor would further devour dimensional spaces, they didn't know anything else. Devouring dimensional spaces sounded like a reasonable explanation, but when he thought about it, it didn't make much sense. Dimensional spaces were so big that they were even bigger than the entire universe. So what if the seamless corridor devoured a part of such a huge space? Time slowly passed. By the 4th month of Jiyu Han's stay in the world of the seamless corridor, Jiyu Han suddenly encountered someone he would never have guessed would be here. Sister Michin. Guhan called out the name of the person in front of him in disbelief. This was because the person who appeared in front of Guhan was his godsister, Misaka Michin. Although Guhan was very happy to see someone he knew, the The problem was that Misaka Michin was in the seamless corridor. A month before Ji Han entered the seamless corridor, he had contacted Misaka Mikoto, hoping that she would be able to help his disciple, Lu Shihua, if it was within her capabilities. With the existence of the mayor of the seamless corridor was one of the safest places on Earth. How could Misaka Michin suddenly appear in the seamless corridor like him? With the existence of the mayor of Freedom Metropolis was one of the safest places on Earth. There was no way Misaka Mikoto would suddenly appear in the seamless corridor like he did. Could it be that something happened in the future that caused Misaka Michin to be captured as a sacrifice? Guhan immediately thought of a possibility. At first, Guhan instinctively thought that Misaka Michin was imprisoned in the seamless corridor before he entered, so Guhan was very puzzled. However, Guhan neglected one thing. In this world of the seamless corridor, the person he met might not necessarily be the Misaka Michin from the same time period or before him. It was very likely that he would meet a Misaka Michin who entered the seamless corridor a few hundred years later. Who could say for sure what would happen a few hundred years later? Therefore, the current Misaka Michin might have been captured into the seamless corridor a few hundred years later in the real world. That would explain why he was able to meet Misaka Michin. With that thought in mind, Guhan became even more excited. If Misaka Michin was really captured a few hundred years later, it would mean that she already knew what was going to happen in the future. She would also know whether he would be able to escape with Artoria from the seamless corridor in the future. That would be equivalent to him knowing the future. With that thought in mind, Guhan rushed up to Misaka Michin and asked, "Who are you? Why are you so close to me? Get away from me." What surprised Guhan was that Misaka Michin's first reaction upon seeing him was to release a strong electric current from her fingertips. Fortunately, Guhan's reflexes were extremely quick. The moment the electric current appeared, he jumped behind Misaka Michin and avoided her attack. "Sister Misaka, don't you recognize me?" Guhan said with a headache when he saw Misaka Michin's reaction. "Me? That's such an old pickup line. You should tell your sister about it. Although I don't know where you heard of my name, if you dare to come within 5 meters of me again, I'll let you have a taste of my super electromagnetic gun." Misaka Mikoto took out a small coin from her pocket. Ji Han, who knew Misaka Mikoto very well, knew what it meant when Misaka Mikoto took out a coin. However, Guhan was not afraid of Misaka Michin's super electromagnetic gun. Such an attack would not be able to hurt the current Guhan. However, when Misaka Michin used the godly electromagnetic gun, Guhan would still be a little afraid. After all, the godly electromagnetic gun could already hurt Guhan's body. "Miss Michin, why don't you recognize me? I've never heard that entering the seamless corridor will cause one's memory to disappear. Could it be that my guess just now was wrong, and things are not like this?" Guhan thought to himself. Misaka Michin did not seem to want to talk to Guhan at all. The two of them fell into silence. After a few minutes, the arrogant Misaka Mikoto could no longer hold it in. After hesitating for a while, Misaka Mikoto suddenly asked Ji Han, "Hey, let me ask you. Have you ever seen a man who's slightly taller than me, likes to wear a white shirt and black pants, has messy hair like a hedgehog, and has a right hand that can make all superpowers disappear?" That's right. Ji Han did not know how many minutes had passed. After hearing Misaka Michin's description, Guhan thought for a while and said, "Miss Michin, are you talking about a guy called JJDMA? That's right. It's that guy. You've met that guy here, right? Where is he? Which direction should I run in to find him?" Misaka Michin became extremely excited when she heard Guhan's words. "It doesn't matter which direction you run in. Once the space-time here changes, the distance will change as well. It's the same no matter which direction you run in," Guhan replied calmly. However, he was even more curious. Were Misaka Michin and JJDMA not living well in the Freedom City? Could it be that the two of them were trapped in the seamless corridor? "Hey, what do you mean? Why can't I understand a single word you're saying? Can you please make your logic clearer?" Misaka Michin, who was on the other side, said in confusion. "What? Miss Michin, Don't you know the truth about the seamless corridor? Have you just entered this world? Guhan asked with narrowed eyes. That's not it. Misaka Michin lowered her head in shame. Actually, I've been in this damned world for 50 to 60 years. I've met a few people along the way. However, they tried to touch me the moment they appeared. In the end, I sent them flying with electricity. That's why I don't know much about this world. I see. Then, I'll give Miss Michin a simple explanation. Ji Yuhan smiled bitterly. Although this kind of job was one of the jobs he hated the most, for Misaka Mikoto's sake, he still explained everything about the seamless corridor in detail to Misaka Mikoto. This place is so strange. If I had known, I wouldn't have come in. After listening to Guhan's explanation, Misaka Michin said with a pained and regretful expression. Why? Miss Michin, you weren't captured but walked in on your own? Guhan asked curiously after hearing Misaka Michin's words. That's right. I heard that JJDMA escaped into a dimensional rift to avoid being hunted down. Therefore, I sneaked in and wanted to rescue that guy. In the end, I didn't expect to find him after 50 to 60 years. It seems like I'm too gullible. He's not even here, Misaka Michin said with a bitter smile. Miss Michin, may I ask when did you come in? When you came in, were there any powerful human swordbearers in that world? Guhan immediately asked. To confirm the time when Misaka Michin entered, he could only confirm it through the famous swordbearers. What swordbearers? I've never heard of them. I've never heard of such a name. Misaka Michin tilted her head and looked at Guhan in confusion. Guhan was even more confused. Could Misaka Michin's memory have really been erased before she entered? Otherwise, how could she have never heard of the words swordbearers? However, the problem was that Misaka Michin still remembered her old lover, JJDMA. Looking at her blushing face when she mentioned JJDMA, it was obvious that she had a deep impression of him. Could someone really erase Misaka Michin's memory? Wait, don't tell me the swordbearers you're talking about are those strange humans who can turn swords into young girls to fight. Suddenly, Misaka Michin revealed a look of realization and said, aren't those people called swordmen? Since when were there swordbearers? Misaka Michin blinked and said with a puzzled expression. Chapter 1386. Swordsman was a name that humans were ashamed of. Therefore, it was buried deep in the river of history. Other than some professional history textbooks that would mention it, most humans did not know about it. The name swordsman appeared on the 12th day after the apocalypse, which was when some humans in the old Yangjing city began to synchronize with the sword ladies that appeared in large numbers. In the end, they discovered that they had the power to fight against Yuenko. In the end, they were unified by the government, and the government gave them a unified name. At that time, in order to make it easier to remember, the government gave the name swordsman. The sword ladies were not called sword ladies, but sword slaves. At that time, humans were focused on the battle, so they were not interested in whether the name swordsman sounded good or not. It was only when humans retreated into the dimensional gap that they began to recuperate for about 10 years. Then, some people suggested that the name swordsman was not nice to hear and was an insulting name. Later on, Kunzu stood his ground and changed the name to sword wielder. It was said that this was the name that Kunzu had thought of from the beginning. However, after he arrived in Yangjing City, due to the strong control of the government, Kunzu had no choice but to listen to the government and accept the name swordsman. Later on, when humans realized that the sword lady was the foundation of battle and the name swordslave was a huge insult to the sword lady, humans changed the name of swordslave to sword lady. Since then, the name had never been changed. After the appearance of sword wielder, Yuan Ku also changed the name to sword wielder, and the name sword wielder was no longer heard. Therefore, the name swordsman had not existed for more than 3 years in human history. This meant that only Yuan Ku, who was active 3 years before the apocalypse, would say the name swordsman. However, based on Guhan's understanding, Misaka Mikoto was used to being called sword wielder. When they were together, Guhan had never heard Misaka Mikoto say the name sword wielder. However, not only did Misaka Mikoto not know the name of sword wielder, but she had also said sword wielder's name. Excluding the possibility that Misaka Mikoto was deliberately using the name to insult Guhan, there was only one explanation. Misaka Mikoto had never heard of the name Sword Wielder. Guhan could not help but feel excited. Could it be that Misaka Mikoto was, Miss Mikoto, when you entered this place, were humans still hiding in the dimensional rift? Before Guhan could finish his sentence, the world began to change again. Misaka Mikoto disappeared before Guhan's eyes. Let me analyze this. If Miss Mikoto really entered the seamless corridor 3 years ago when humans were still called Sword Wielder, doesn't that mean that Miss Misaka Mikoto had entered the seamless corridor 1,000 years ago? Guhan made a shocking guess. This guess should not be underestimated. The information contained in it was undoubtedly important to Guhan. This was because Guhan had interacted with Misaka Mikoto for a very long time. He was very sure that Misaka Mikoto was still alive in the real world 1,000 years later. If Misaka Mikoto really entered the seamless corridor 1,000 years ago, didn't that mean that Misaka Mikoto had left the seamless corridor and was able to appear in the world 1,000 years later? If Guhan's guess was correct, it also meant that the seamless corridor was not a place where one could not escape. At the very least, Misaka Mikoto had successfully escaped from the seamless corridor. Moreover, it was very likely that she had escaped with her JJDMA. Oh right, I remember now. According to the human records, Misaka Mikoto only appeared on the 3rd day after the apocalypse. After that, there were no other records of her for more than 600 years. Only 400 years ago did it suddenly appear in human records. At that time, the humans thought that Misaka Mikoto was living alone in a place unknown to the humans. Now that I look at it, Misaka Mikoto might have been trapped in the seamless corridor for a total of 600 years and only managed to escape the seamless corridor 400 years ago. That's right, that must be the case. I still remember Misaka Mikoto saying that she was separated from JJDMA when she first came to this world. At that time, she was looking for JJDMA all over the world and did not care about anything else. If that's the case, then the fact that Misaka Mikoto accidentally entered the seamless corridor while looking for JJDMA makes sense. Guhan speculated excitedly. He was becoming more and more certain that Misaka Mikoto had entered the seamless corridor before and had successfully escaped. As long as Misaka Mikoto could escape, he would definitely be able to leave the seamless corridor as well. The only difference was how long it took. However, there was still one doubt in Guhan's mind. Before he entered the seamless corridor, he had clearly told Misaka Mikoto that he was going to the seamless corridor to save Artoria. As for Misaka Mikoto, other than telling him that it was a mysterious and dangerous area, she did not say anything else. Based on his relationship with Misaka Mikoto, would Misaka Mikoto hide the secret of the seamless corridor from him and not tell him how to leave the seamless corridor? Or could it be that Misaka Mikoto had never entered the seamless corridor and it was all just his speculation? Or could it be that after leaving the seamless corridor, all memories would be erased and Misaka Mikoto had forgotten everything that happened in the seamless corridor? All sorts of speculations gave Guhan a headache. He desperately wanted to meet Misaka Mikoto again and ask her about it. Unfortunately, for the next year, Guhan did not meet Misaka Mikoto again. Yes, that's right. In the time it took to say those few words, Ji-Yu-Han had already spent an entire year in the seamless corridor, but Ji-Yu-Han hadn't met anyone important at all. Of course, it was not as if he did not gain anything. At least, Guhan met more than 10 different Yuan-Ku. Through these Yuan-Ku's transactions and communication, Guhan found out a lot of information about Misaka Mikoto and Artoria. For example, the latest Misaka Mikoto that Yuan-Ku met was in the year 545. At that time, Misaka Mikoto was still looking for JJ Dangma. More than 500 years had passed and Misaka Mikoto had not found JJ Dangma. Misaka Mikoto's mental state was on the verge of a breakdown. There was also Artoria. Many other Yuan-Ku met Artoria. Except for one Artoria that Yuan-Ku met who was more normal and willing to communicate with others, the other Artoria that Yuan-Ku met were extremely quiet. She seemed to have no interest in interacting with anyone. She would just walk by quietly and ignore others even if they took the initiative to talk to her. To everyone who lived in the seamless corridor, this was without a doubt an extremely strange situation. Due to the long and monotonous life, whenever Yuan Ku met a living person, he would immediately talk to them excitedly and would not let go of any opportunity to talk. However, Artoria was so cold and indifferent. This made Guhan very worried. There were usually only two possibilities for someone to be able to remain indifferent in a place like the seamless corridor. First, Artoria's mental fortitude had reached an extremely terrifying level. Even a few hundred years of lonely life would not make Artoria feel bored. This possibility sounded very likely, but in reality, Guhan did not think that Artoria's mental fortitude was that strong. From the various information and interactions in the game, Artoria was actually a girl who could not withstand loneliness. If the first possibility was impossible, then the second possibility was extremely likely. Artoria's mental state had completely collapsed. Although she was still walking, her soul and self-consciousness had already collapsed. This was the situation that Guhan did not want to see the most. Qigong. We meet again. When Guhan saw the next Yuan Ku he ran into, a smile appeared on his face. This Yuan Ku was naturally the first Yuan Ku that Guhan had met in the seamless corridor, Hong Qigong. Oh, it's you. I've finally met you. The books you gave me last time were terrible. They were all gone before I even finished half of them. I was dying for them. Hong Qigong jumped up in excitement the moment he saw Guhan. According to what Hong Qigong said, although Guhan had only met him a year ago, it had been more than 70 years since Hong Qigong and Guhan had met. Of course, those novels that had no sequels would make Hong Qigong jump up and down in excitement. No problem. I'll give these books to you, Qigong. This time, Guhan was very generous. He directly gave all 20 novels in his dimensional pocket to Hong Qigong. Hong Qigong was so happy that his beard became crooked. However, Hong Qigong felt a little awkward after his happiness. You're so generous, but if I were to take your things for free, it would be too unsightly. It's no big deal. Just treat this as a gift from this junior to you, Qigong. Ji Yuhan smiled. No. I'm not an ungrateful person like Old Poison. But I don't have any more novels to give you. I've already given them to others. Hong Qigong grabbed at his tattered clothes and gritted his teeth. He took out 2 antique books and handed them to Guhan. Forget it, this book is for you. It should be enough to exchange for your 20 novels. 9 Yin Sutra, 18 Dragons Subduing Palms. Ji Yuhan looked at the names of the 2 books in his hands and read them out curiously. Chapter 1387. These are indeed 2 amazing books. I've never even heard of the usage of the so-called inner force. I've benefited a lot from them, Guhan exclaimed as he closed the 9 Yin Sutra and 18 Dragon Subduing Palms. Although these 2 books talked about the inner force was similar to the sword essence. The 9 swords of mysterious heaven passed down in Guhan's family talked about the usage of the sword essence and was a secret manual suitable for sword wielders to train. However, according to Guhan's investigation, the 9 swords of mysterious heaven was also modified from the martial arts secret manual of the Wudang sect. The Wudang secret manuals of the martial artists and the sword wielders' secret manuals were similar, especially the usage of the inner force, which was almost exactly the same as the sword essence. Between the 9 Yin Sutra and the 18 Dragon Subduing Palms, because the 18 Dragon Subduing Palms was a palm technique, it did not have many benefits for Guhan. It only allowed Guhan to use it as a reference to perfect the Chaos Sword technique through the changes in the palm technique. However, the 9 Yin Sutra was different. It was actually a method to cultivate inner force, which was completely different from the sword wielders. The sword essence of the sword wielders was obtained through plundering, and there was no such thing as cultivating the sword essence. Moreover, Guhan had also tried to cultivate the sword essence according to the method in the 9 Yin Sutra, but the sword essence did not increase. From this point of view, the 9 Yin Sutra was even more useless for Guhan. However, Guhan had a faint premonition that the 9 Yin Sutra might give him an unexpected surprise in the future. After putting away the 2 books, Guhan embarked on a journey that he did not know when and where he would be able to find Artoria. However, What Guhan did not expect was that after 3 days, he would actually meet a dead Yuan Ku. 50 bells. Guhan looked at the woman who suddenly appeared in front of him after the spacetime distortion and shouted in surprise. The girl in front of him was wearing a red uniform, a black miniskirt, and a pair of pure white knee socks. Wasn't she the adoptive mother who raised his daughter, Jiyu Xuanwu, and the former general manager of Guanghui Amusement Park, Yuan Ku, who died tragically in the hands of Gilgamesh? How could she appear here? Thousand Do Isuzu had clearly died in front of Guhan. Even the dimensional vortex had appeared. Why did this woman appear in front of him again? However, Guhan quickly understood that this Thousand Do Isuzu was most likely the same as Misaka Mikoto, who had entered the seamless corridor hundreds of years ago. If this really was the case, then it meant that Thousand Do Isuzu had successfully left the seamless corridor, which was why he had died in front of him 3 years ago. "It's you, Master." Seeing Guhan, Thousand Do Isuzu revealed a pleasantly surprised expression and directly called Guhan Master. This once again shocked Guhan. "You called me Master. It seems that you must have met me before. We must have a good relationship, right?" Hearing Thousand Do Isuzu call him that, Guhan immediately realized that Thousand Do Isuzu must have met him before and had many stories with him. That was why she had such a reaction and called him Master. Yes. Thousand Do Isuzu nodded vigorously. While Guhan was unprepared, she directly threw herself into Guhan's arms. Her little nose was pressed against Guhan's wool sweater, and she forcefully sniffed Guhan's scent coming from the sweater. She said with a relieved expression, "I finally feel this warm scent again." "Is that so?" Guhan awkwardly touched Thousand Do Isuzu's head. After a while, he asked, "Isuzu, can you tell me what happened between us in the past? And do you know Alto?" "Wait, Master, you don't know what happened between us in the past." Before Guhan's words were finished, Thousand Do Isuzu directly interrupted him. At this time, she found that Guhan was still holding a book in his hand, and this book was the Nine Yin Sutra that Guhan had been constantly thinking about. "Nine Yin Sutra. Master, could it be that this is the first time we've met?" Thousand Do 50 bells jumped out of Jiyu Han's embrace and asked in surprise. "Well, if you haven't seen me before, then I think this is indeed the first time we meet," Guhan said with a bitter smile. Hearing Guhan's words, Thousand Do Isuzu lowered her head and said with a little shame, "Then I'm sorry, I can't answer any of your questions." "Why?" Guhan asked confusedly. "Because the past must be experienced by Master yourself to be meaningful. If I tell Master everything now, then Master will definitely feel that the story that will happen next is meaningless." Thousand Do Isuzu said with her head lowered. "And this is also Master's own order. Master, when you see Thousand Do Isuzu in the future, if I meet a Nine Yin Sutra in the future, I must never tell him anything that happened in the past. This is Master's own order." "Really? It's my own order." Hearing Thousand Do Isuzu's answer, Guhan fell into deep thought. He didn't expect that the one who stopped him now was actually his future self. Then, will my future self stop me from knowing what happened in the future? Guhan was thinking about this question. According to Guhan's analysis of himself, he should not give such an order in the future because his nature was a character that was used to controlling everything. The more he knew, the higher the chance of successfully leaving here in the future. It was absolutely impossible for the future self to stop the present self unless something very special happened. The future self felt that if the present self knew this special thing, then the present self would definitely make a wrong decision, so he ordered Thousand Do Isuzu not to disclose what happened in the future. This sounded very reasonable, but after thinking about it carefully, Guhan felt that he was not the kind of extremely emotional person, but an extremely rational character. Facing such a character, as long as the future self fully told everything to the present self, then he would definitely make the most correct decision, and would never be impulsive. But in the end, the future self still stopped Thousand Do Isuzu, which really made Guhan a little confused. Forget it, if this was really a decision made by the future self, then the future self must have a reason to do it. I have to believe in the future self, and don't ask too much about the future. Thinking of this, Guhan put away his brows, revealed a faint smile, and asked Thousand Do Isuzu, "Alright, then I won't ask you about the future. Right, do you have any more novels on you? Do you want me to give some to you?" "No need." Thousand Do Isuzu shook his head vigorously. "When we first met, Master, you gave me many novels. I haven't finished reading them yet, no need." "Oh." Guhan nodded, then asked, "If you can't tell me about the future, then can you tell me how you entered the world of the seamless corridor?" "This." Thousand Do Isuzu thought for a moment and said, "Master, you only said that I'm not allowed to speak of what happened in the seamless corridor, but you didn't say anything about what happened before the seamless corridor." "Then I'll tell you, Master. Actually, I came in a bit baffled. Her Highness and I heard that there was a dimensional rift in the northeast of China, a place where Yuan Ku and humans could live in harmony. Her Highness and I were tired of the endless killing on Fusang Island, so we found the dimensional rift with some friends and lived in it together. It was indeed a very happy place where Yuan Ku and humans lived in harmony. However, that world was contaminated by something, and we could no longer grow any food. Furthermore, the people gradually became sluggish, like walking corpses. Her Highness and I decided to help these humans, so we decided to use the power of magic to build an amusement park in this rift, hoping to help these humans find happiness. However, I didn't expect that when we were digging the ground, we would discover a pitch-black hole. I was careless and fell into the hole, which is how I ended up here," Thousand Do Isuzu replied. "What? You're saying that you entered the seamless corridor directly from Radiant's amusement park?" Guhan stood up from the ground, giving Thousand Do Isuzu, who was quietly narrating his story, a fright. "Radiant's amusement park? Could it be that when Master entered this world, Radiant's amusement park had already been built?" Thousand Do Isuzu asked in surprise. "Wait. Let me recall." Guhan motioned for Thousand Do Isuzu to stop talking for now. He tried his best to recall the relevant historical materials he had seen in Radiant City, according to the historical materials of Radiant City's inheritor. The desolation and barrenness of this Radiant City was caused by the battle between two deities. Later, a new deity came here and summoned Radiant's amusement park out of thin air, suppressing the dead deity. At the same time, he taught the humans here how to rely on absorbing pollen to transform the energy needed for survival. The humans there also became demented because they absorbed too much pollen in the air, and finally, they were like living corpses. According to the historical record, the Guanghui amusement park was not built, but summoned out of thin air by a certain Yuanko. This was very different from the 1,000 Dippers and 52 Bells story. According to the 1,000 Dippers and 52 Bells, the Guanghui amusement park was built by them. Chapter 1388. Did you, your princess, and your friends really build this Radiant's amusement park? There's no steel or construction tools there. How did you build such a huge amusement park? Guhan asked doubtfully. It was really built by me and the princess. Seeing Guhan's doubt, Thousand Do Isuzu immediately said excitedly, "We used the power of magic. Our Red Maple Kingdom's steel magic can extract all the iron and other metal elements that exist in the air, ores, and soil, and form them in reality according to a certain ratio and the model in our mind. This is the magic we used to build the Radiant's amusement park. If you don't believe me, I'll show you." After Thousand Do Isuzu finished speaking, he took out a shiny metal badge from his clothes. Then, Thousand Do Isuzu let the metal badge float in the air. His left hand pointed at the metal badge, while his right hand held it a meter away from the badge. Thousand Do's mouth was silently chanting some magic incantation, and the metal badge quickly melted like ice. In the palm of Thousand Do's right hand, a metal object gradually formed. Finally, when the metal badge completely disappeared, a golden bullet appeared in Thousand Do Isuzu's right palm. The whole process took about 20 seconds. This is the Red Maple Kingdom's metal magic. It's also the magic that the princess and I used to build the Radiant's amusement park. Thousand Do Isuzu said with a sigh. Then, the bullet turned back into the metal badge under Thousand Do Isuzu's magical control. "I see." Guhan nodded thoughtfully, and then said, "But if that's the case, the speed of building the Radiant's amusement park shouldn't be that fast, right?" That's true. Thousand Do Isuzu nodded. The princess and I worked hard for a whole year to build the amusement park's first attraction, the pirate ship. In the end, when we were preparing to build the second facility, I fell into it while I was digging for ores, leaving the princess alone in that world. Originally, the two of us planned to build the amusement park in 50 years. If it's just the princess alone, I'm afraid it'll take more than 100 years, Thousand Do Isuzu said with a hint of sadness and worry. Don't worry. Guhan stroked Chidu Isuzu's hair. I did go to your Guangguang amusement park once before I entered this world. Everything there is very well built, and there are already 200 to 300 yuan ku living in the amusement park. They are all living well, so you don't have to worry. Really? Thousand Do Isuzu said in surprise. Master, why didn't you tell me before? I've been worried for hundreds of years. I've always been afraid that something dangerous would happen to the princess in the amusement park. Now, I can finally breathe a sigh of relief. I didn't tell you probably because the future me knows, but the present me has already told you. Guhan smiled and felt that this might not be his future revenge on Chidu Isuzu for hiding the truth at this time. What about the princess? Master, when you went to the Radiance amusement park, did you see the princess? Is she living well? Chidu Isuzu asked. Who is the princess you're talking about? When I was in the amusement park, I didn't know anyone was called princess. Guhan shook his head. Of course it's Princess Tirath. She is the princess of our Red Maple Kingdom, one of the noblest princesses in the world. Thousand Do Isuzu replied. Tirath. Guhan thought for a while and realized that he had never heard of this name in the Radiance amusement park. If he told Thousand Do Isuzu this, she would probably be too sad. So, after a moment of hesitation, Guhan said vaguely, I have indeed heard of this name, but she seemed to be sick at that time, and I didn't have the chance to see her, so I don't know the specific situation. Then it can't be wrong. The princess has always been weak and sickly. This is something that can't be helped. Thousand Do Isuzu sighed, but her expression was completely happy. Obviously, Thousand Do Isuzu had completely believed Guhan's words. This made Guhan feel a sense of guilt, as he felt that he had lied to Thousand Do Isuzu. By the way, do you know a girl named Artoria? She is the queen of the kingdom of Arthur, Guhan asked again. Since Thousand Do Isuzu could raise Artoria's child in the future, it meant that Thousand Do Isuzu must have a very close relationship with Artoria. Previously, Guhan did not know when Thousand Do Isuzu had established a close relationship with Artoria, but after meeting Thousand Do Isuzu in the Seamless Corridor, Guhan was basically sure that Thousand Do Isuzu had become friends with Artoria in the Seamless Corridor. You can't tell Master about this. Thousand Do Isuzu shook her head and did not answer Guhan's question, but in fact, she was indirectly answering Guhan. Obviously, Thousand Do Isuzu now knew Artoria. Otherwise, she would not have shook her head and refused without thinking. It seemed that his guess was right. Thousand Do Isuzu had become friends with Artoria here. Master, I haven't seen Master for a long time. Can I? While Guhan was deep in thought, Thousand Do Isuzu suddenly stuttered and could not finish a sentence for a long time. Can I what? Guhan asked curiously. Can I rest on Master's thigh like before? Thousand Do Isuzu said with a red face. Of course, if you need it. Guhan nodded. Thousand Do Isuzu happily pillowed on Guhan's thigh. Guhan wanted to say something more, but when he looked down, he found that Thousand Do Isuzu had already fallen into a deep sleep. Even when time and space changed again, Thousand Do Isuzu did not wake up. She just lay on Guhan's thigh and separated. It seems that the matter at Radiant Amusement Park is not so simple. There are many contradictions between Thousand Do Isuzu's description and the Radiant City's records. It seems that one of the two sides is lying. Feeling the empty thigh, Guhan lowered his head and analyzed. Thousand Do Isuzu doesn't look like a girl with a heavy heart. She doesn't seem to have any reason to lie to me. After all, the Radiant City's records are hundreds of years apart and have passed through the hands of countless people. It's inevitable that there would be some deliberate tampering. And from what happened in the past year, I'm afraid the seamless corridor is not as simple as saving Artoria. Many of the mysteries hidden in my body might be solved here. Guhan muttered to himself. Although this was just Guhan's intuition, Guhan was very confident. Time slowly passed, and in the blink of an eye, another year had passed. What made Guhan happy was that in this year, he had met Artoria 3 times. In the past year, he had met Artoria 3 times, but all 3 times, Artoria was the same as before. She completely ignored Jiyu Han and had a look of deep hatred on her face. He also met Thousand Do Isuzu once again, but Thousand Do Isuzu maintained the same attitude and just slept on Guhan's thigh for another hour. In addition, Guhan also met many Yuan Ku whom he met for the first time. Thus, the number of different Yuan Ku he met reached more than 20. And thanks to Guhan's large collection of novels, these Yuan Ku all treated Guhan as their best friend in the world. They talked about everything with Guhan and told many things to Guhan. But what surprised Guhan was that in the process of communicating with these Yuan Ku, he found that the probability of them meeting other Yuan Ku was far lower than him. It was already extremely lucky for them to be able to meet other Yuan Ku 3 times a year. However, in the short span of 2 years, the total number of times he had encountered Yuan Bandit had already exceeded 50, which was far more than the other Yuan Bandit. This matter may be explained by good luck, but Guhan did not think it was as simple as just luck. There was probably something else hidden in it. Just as Guhan was trying to find some clues to leave the seamless corridor from his conversation with other Yuan Ku, a man with hair like a hedgehog stood in front of Guhan with a puzzled and confused face. Arigato. Nihan. Seeing Guhan appear, the man immediately asked in a language that Guhan could not understand. Nihan. That sounds like a lost Japanese language. Hearing this term, Guhan was stunned for a moment. Then he remembered that the word Nihan seemed to be used to describe Fusang in Japanese. It seems that this is not Fusang. The hedgehog man sighed and asked in Chinese again, "Hello, is this still China?" Jiyu Han hesitated for a moment before replying, "I don't think this is China's territory." "Not China. Then this is North Korea, South Korea, or Russia?" The man asked 3 countries in a row. None of them. This place doesn't belong to any country. It doesn't even belong to Earth or the universe. This should be a place where time and space intersect. This is called the Seamless Corridor. Guhan replied. Seamless Corridor. That sounds like a very Chunibya name. The hedgehog man complained. Then, he put on a serious face and asked sincerely, "Hello, I want to go back to Fusang, back to the campus city. May I ask which direction should I go to leave this corridor?" "I'm afraid you won't be able to go back no matter which direction you go." Guhan carefully looked at the hedgehog man. Black trousers, white shirt, hedgehog-like hair, and the campus city that had just popped out. It was obvious that this hedgehog man was the boyfriend that Misaka Mikoto had been looking for. Moreover, he looked like he had just appeared in this corridor. This meant that the current JJDMA was actually the JJDMA from 1,000 years ago. Chapter 1389. In the following period of time, Guhan and JJ Dangma started chatting. JJ Dangma was a very talkative person. After some communication, Guhan quickly understood the story of what happened to JJ Dangma. At this time, JJ Dangma was still in a state of confusion. According to JJ Dangma, just 3 days ago, he was preparing to build a love nest with Misaka Mikoto in the campus city. In the end, when he woke up the next morning, he found himself in a lush forest. Looking at the environment, it was not the campus city that was located on the sea at all. Instead, it was more like an inland area. JJ Dangma walked in the forest for a few hours before he found signs of human habitation. In the end, he was shocked to find that all the people here were speaking a language that JJ Dangma did not understand at all. Moreover, their expressions were very panicked. There were beacons and flames of war everywhere. The entire human world had fallen into a world of catastrophes. Later on, JJ Dangma found out that the people who attacked the humans were monsters. There were also humans who seemed to have gone mad and wore all sorts of strange clothes. At that time, JJ Dangma thought that something abnormal had happened in the campus city and affected the entire world. However, when JJ Dangma saw many creatures that originally only existed in the two-dimensional world, JJ Dangma realized that things were not as simple as they seemed. He immediately took action and used his fantasy killer ability to help the humans fight against these monsters. At the same time, many survivors gradually gathered around him. In the end, they formed a large team of thousands. In the process of getting along with them, JJ Dangma met a girl who understood Japanese and was said to be a uploader of Bilibili. With the help of the other party, he found out that he was actually in the territory of Huaxia. After JJ Dangma told the other party that he wanted to return to the campus city, the human girl's expression became extremely strange. In the end, he secretly told JJ Dma that if he really came from the school city, then he was definitely not a person of this world. He was the same as those monsters, a creature from the 2D world. At first, of course, Dangma Ju didn't believe the words of this Bilibili uploader until the uploader used his mobile phone to play a total of 6 seasons of anime titled A Certain Forbidden Book Catalog and A Certain Super Electromagnetic Gun. P.S. That's right. In this world, there are already Forbidden Book 3 and Super Electromagnetic Gun 3. That's how capricious it is. Dangma Ju had no choice but to believe that he was actually someone from the 2D world. After this discovery, JJ Dangma realized that although this survivor team was established by himself, all humans, including the uploader of Bilibili, were cautiously keeping a distance from him. JJ Dangma was very clear about their thoughts. Obviously, they were afraid that he would suddenly harm them like those monsters from the 2D world. Therefore, in the end, JJ Dangma integrated his own survivor team into a larger survivor team and left the team alone. JJ Dangma's thoughts were very simple. He just wanted to return to the world he was familiar with. Therefore, he very naturally chose to return to Japan and go there to help his compatriots. JJ Dangma walked all the way to the seaside. In the end, he actually walked into the territory of North Korea. Finally, he found an open door in a cave on a high mountain. Could this door be the door that can allow me to return to my own world? With this thought in mind, JJ Dangma, who was already a little dizzy and his mind had become extremely dull, directly walked through the door. Then, he met Guhan. So this is your first time entering the seamless corridor. After listening to JJ Dangma's narration, Guhan looked at JJ Dangma deeply. According to JJ Dangma, if he really entered the seamless corridor on the 3rd day after the apocalypse, then it was very likely that JJ Dangma was the first Yuan Ku to enter the seamless corridor. And so far, he was the last person to enter the seamless corridor. This was the first person he met. Seeing him like this was a very strange kind of fate. Yes. JJ Dangma nodded his head vigorously. Then, he asked Guhan with great hope. Is there a way to return to my own world? My Mikoto is still waiting for me in Gakuen City. I can't leave her there alone. I'm afraid we can't go back here. Guhan shook his head. Then, he roughly told JJ Dangma about the seamless corridor. He also told him about Yuan Ku and the sword bearer. Finally, he even told JJ Dangma about the fact that he came from 1,000 years in the future. Is that so? So, we've become the invaders. This is really ridiculous. After listening to Guhan's narration, JJ Dangma slumped to the ground weakly. Obviously, he could not accept the fact that he had become the villain. Of course, what was even more difficult for JJ Dangma to accept was that he was about to be separated from Misaka Mikoto. This made JJ Dangma could not help but mutter, Mikoto, Billy, don't worry, I'll tell you a piece of good news. Your Miss Misaka Mikoto has also come to this world and is now in the seamless corridor. She is also very eager to find you. I've met her several times before. As long as you wait patiently, the two of you will definitely be reunited. Seeing JJ Dangma's dazed expression, Guhan said calmly, What? Mikoto is here too. Hearing what Guhan said, JJ Dangma stood up from the ground and stomped his feet hard. How is this good news? This is clearly the worst news. Such a chaotic and cruel world is not a place that a kind girl like Mikoto can stay in. No, I must find Mikoto. I must take her away from this D*MN world. Do whatever you want, Guhan said with a blank expression. Of course, he knew that in at least 1,000 years, JJ Dangma would not be able to find his way back. The two of them seemed to have completely accepted their fate. They had to live in the Freedom City. This was their destiny and it could not be changed. Then, Guhan and JJ Dangma fell into a state of silence. The two of them just sat quietly in the seamless corridor. Time passed by until the light in the entire world began to change again. All right. It's time for us to part ways. I hope you can meet Miss Mikoto soon. It's really hard for her to find you. Guhan stood up and said with a sigh. Thank you, Mr. Guhan. Thank you for telling me directly. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I would still be in a state of panic. Thank you. JJ Dangma extended his right hand in front of Guhan. Guhan nodded and grabbed JJ Dangma's right hand. The moment the two hands touched, Guhan's face immediately showed an expression of extreme horror. My sword essence. My sword essence has disappeared. The moment the two hands touched each other, the sword essence that filled Guhan's body suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if it had never existed. Even his purple mansion was completely lost. The moment Guhan's hands touched each other, he became a pitiful mortal. Let go. Guhan's body was instantly covered by a cold chill. He immediately freed his hand from JJ Dangma's right hand. The moment the two hands separated, all the lost sword essence and the lost purple mansion returned to Guhan's control. Guhan became the immortal sword wielder Guhan again. I'm sorry. I seem to have scared you. Seeing Guhan's expression, JJ Dangma immediately smiled awkwardly and apologized to Guhan. Sorry, I forgot that my right hand is different from a normal person's right hand. All the superpowers will disappear when they touch my right hand, so it may have caused you some discomfort. I'm sorry. So that's how it is. This is the legendary fantasy killer. Guhan, who calmed down once again, lowered his head and thought silently. There were not many descriptions of JJ Dangma's ability in the human's information. It was only mentioned that it could nullify the abilities of the sword wielder and Yuan Ku. Guhan had also heard about JJ Dangma from Misaka Mikoto. He knew that the opponent's right hand was called the fantasy killer, and it was a kind of power that could negate superpowers. But Ji Han had never thought that this fantasy assassin would actually be able to directly negate the sword essence and violet palace in his body. These were sword essence and violet palace that had reached the level of an immortal sword, but the instant they came into contact with his right hand, they were actually completely erased. At that moment, if there was a second Yuan Ku who launched a fatal attack at him, Guhan would not even have the ability to resist and would die under his opponent's sword. This was a very terrifying ability. With that thought in mind, Guhan raised his head and looked at JJ Dangma. Fortunately, the opponent was a free person and had never participated in the disputes between humans and Yuan Ku. Otherwise, with this kind of power, Guhan would have to kill the opponent to get rid of any future troubles. Although the opponent could make him lose control of his sword essence, it had to come into contact with his body. In that case, Guhan had 1,000 ways to kill the opponent. I'm fine. Don't worry about it, I'm fine. Guhan stood up and quickly regained his composure. Hee. JJ Dangma touched his hedgehog head and looked around. Suddenly, his expression became a little strange as he asked curiously, Mr. Guhan, didn't you say that after the space-time changes, the two of us will be separated? Why are we still together after so much time has passed? Guhan was also stunned. That was right, the constantly changing colors had stopped. Logically speaking, the space-time change should have passed. Why were the two of them still together? What was going on? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.